Hey kids, what terrible villain will Aladdin fight today? Abis Mal the desert thug? Mechanicles and his crazy clockwork creations? Or somebody new? I don't know. Do you? No!
Like a genie offering you 3 wishes, I'm starting with 3 announcements. I initially wanted to do a script-to-screen about the different drafts of Aladdin and how the story developed before this one. Given my schedule and the general timing of things, I still want to make that, but it will probably come out sometime after this. Second, given how many Jafar appearances there have been over the years, I'm not covering every single one, just most of them. If I don't mention a cameo on here, it most likely means I just didn't have anything to say about it. Finally, I'm not going to discuss the musical Twisted by StarKid. It's an amazing show, one I was actually lucky enough to see live, but it's a fan production, and I'm sticking to the official material. With all that out of the way, let's take a look at my favorite of all the Disney franchises, Aladdin, with its many, many villains. As always, we'll start with the source material. Aladdin and His Wonderful Lamp is part of the collection 1001 Arabian Nights, although it was added in a later publication by French translator Antoine Gallard, with the story itself credited to Hannah Diab. Our tale takes place in China, although this detail is often forgotten, and concerns a young man named Aladdin and his mother, who frets about having such a lazy son. A wicked sorcerer has been after a magic oil lamp hidden in a secret cave, and needs a good patsy to make the dangerous trek to get it. Observing Aladdin, he decides the kid's his best fit, and pretends to be the brother of Aladdin's late father. Aladdin and his mother buy it, and Aladdin joins his uncle on a trip far beyond the city. The sorcerer summons the cave's entrance, and gives Aladdin a special ring for protection. Aladdin braves the cave's pitfalls and retrieves the lamp within. However, when it's time to come out, instead of helping him, the sorcerer demands the lamp first. Aladdin refuses, saying he wants to be safe before he hands it over, and the impatient sorcerer leaves him trapped in the dark cave. Aladdin ends up rubbing his ring, revealing that it holds a genie. The genie takes Aladdin home, where he and his mother find that the lamp holds an even more powerful genie. Using this one's magic, Aladdin and his mother become rich beyond their wildest dreams. Shortly after this, Aladdin catches a glimpse of the princess and falls in love. The Sultan's vizier wants his son to marry the lovely girl, and Aladdin uses the genie of the lamp to mess with them, spiriting the princess away each night. The princess worries that her engagement to Vizier Jr. is cursed, and calls off the wedding. The vizier has the Sultan give Aladdin several impossible challenges to win the princess's hand, all of which Aladdin accomplishes with his genie. Around this time, the sorcerer finds out what's been going on, and realizes Aladdin has the magic lamp. While Al is off on some wild adventure, the sorcerer disguises himself as a crazy old man, trading new lamps for old, used ones. The princess, not knowing its significance, trades Aladdin's lamp for another. The sorcerer uses the genie to kidnap the princess and the magical palace she and Aladdin reside in. The Sultan gives Aladdin 40 days to find his daughter or face execution. Aladdin is about to give up on his search when he, mostly by accident, realizes he still has the genie of the ring. Although this genie is less powerful and can't counteract the other genie's magic, he can at least take Aladdin to where he's hiding. Aladdin and the princess work together to poison the sorcerer and regain control of the lamp. They return home and live happily ever after. There's also a part involving the sorcerer's brother trying to avenge his death, but it feels like a weird little coda more than an ending. For the Disney version, the sorcerer and the vizier characters were combined into one antagonist. It should be noted that the vizier in the original story is not really evil. He's right to be suspicious of Aladdin, even if our sympathies are meant to lie with the hero. As I will explore in the script-to-screen video, Disney's version of Aladdin went through a number of drafts and revisions. The movie was first pitched by Howard Ashman, who had played an invaluable role in the lyrics and story materials for The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. Aladdin was sadly his last Disney collaboration before his death. I cannot overstate the man's importance to the company. In Ashman's pitch, the Wicked Vizier was conceived as a hammy Hans Connery type. Connery is probably best known to Disney fans as the original voice of Captain Hook, although he actually played the Vizier in a different version of Aladdin, one that also featured Mr. Magoo as one of the main characters. The Vizier didn't have a name in this treatment, and he was assisted by Sinbad, a talking parrot named after the Arabian Nights adventurer. This treatment follows the original Aladdin story fairly closely, especially where the Vizier is concerned. At the beginning, after a plan to poison the Sultan fails, the Vizier flees the palace. Now an outlaw, he decides the best way to take over the throne is by harnessing the power of the magic lamp. As in the original story, He pretends to be Aladdin's uncle and ends up leaving the boy in the Cave of Wonders when Aladdin figures out he's been tricked. Later, when the Vizier discovers Aladdin has the genie of the lamp, he does the old lamps for new trick and snatches it from the boy's well-meaning mother. Once Aladdin and his friends are able to track down the Vizier with the genie of the ring's help, an all-out battle ensues for the lamp. In the end, after a lot of lamp tossing, Aladdin gets his hands on it and wishes for the genie to send the villain straight to Persia. Sinbad winds up in a little birdcage. A draft by Linda Wolverton steered pretty far from Ashman's vision, but it did add a few elements that wound up in the final version. The Vizier is now named Jafar, after the villain from Thief of Baghdad. He doesn't have a parrot anymore, but instead hires a trio of thieves named Rashid, Gazeem, and Fakir, who have a personal beef with Aladdin. This also features, for the first time, the scene where Jafar goads a thief into entering the Cave of Wonders at the beginning. The next draft, by the film's directors, John Musker and Ron Clements, helmed closer to the Ashman treatment. In this version, Jafar is written as a real hothead. While he feigns a professional demeanor to the Sultan, he's always 1 second away from an angry outburst. Sinbad the Parrot returns with a new personality. Ashman's treatment simply described him as obnoxious, and in this version he's the opposite of Jafar. Calm, cool, and collected. You get the feeling that he's talked his master off a number of ledges in the past. This was still Howard Ashman's idea. Per director John Musker, Ashman thought it would be funny if the parrot was the most articulate character. In this version, Jafar and his bird meet very different fates from the final movie. Jafar has a fake copy of the lamp in his remodeled palace. During the final battle, the two of them tussle over the lamp, which ends up rolling off the palace's mountain perch. Jafar jumps after it and rubs it in midair, only to find out it's really the copy. Aladdin has the real lamp, and Jafar has, well, a long way down. Sinbad, meanwhile, meets an even messier fate. One of Jafar's earlier tricks in the fight was to turn the Sultan into a giant frog. The frog apparently has an appetite for parrots. We last see Sinbad pinned to the ground by the royal amphibian. When the Sultan gets changed back, he pulls a feather out of his mouth, seemingly unable to remember how it got there. The story was refined some more after this, and the Vizier and his bird finally took their familiar shapes. Although Jafar was conceived as the temperamental one, Jeffrey Katzenberg said they should make him more cool and collected. It made him stand out better among the increasingly zany cast, and it meant that when Jafar's fury did come out, it was scarier. One of the main actors considered for the part was Patrick Stewart, who was unable to take it due to his work schedule with Star Trek. The role went to Jonathan Freeman, who has voiced the character in every animated appearance since. In addition to his silky yet imposing voice, one of Jafar's biggest strengths is his excellent character design and animation, headed by Andreas Teja. The pointy shoulder blades, the sinister dark turban, that twisted beard. I'll use the same descriptor I had for Madame Medusa. He's appealingly unappealing. One of my favorite details was expressed by Teja on his personal blog, describing Jafar's hands as hands you wouldn't want to touch. The movie's general art direction was partially inspired by the caricature works of Al Hirschfeld. This is most prominent in The Genie, designed and led by Eric Goldberg, but it bled into the other characters as a result. After coming off animating Gaston, who was more on the realistic side, Teja was excited to match Jafar's looks to this looser, more cartoony direction. I do have to mention that Jafar, along with a number of other characters, bears a striking resemblance to Richard Williams' then unfinished Thief and the Cobbler, which had been in production since the 60s. Specifically, Jafar resembles that movie's own treacherous vizier, Zigzag. This is really the subject of a whole different video, of which there are already quite a few. I'm not taking sides here, but I will say that Zigzag himself resembles the vizier from an even earlier Aladdin film, the aforementioned 1001 Arabian Nights, so take that as you will. As the Grand Vizier, Jafar is the second most powerful person in Agrabah next to the Sultan. Kind-hearted and lovable as he is, the Sultan is not exactly an efficient ruler. When he's not playing with his many toys, he's fretting over the law that states his daughter must be married to a prince by her next birthday, which is approaching quickly. While he scurries around, Jafar seems to be the one who's actually running things. Of course, the Sultan may be distracted and childlike, but he's not a fool. That's where magic comes into play. Anytime he tries to feebly stand up to Jafar, the Vizier uses his staff to hypnotize the ruler into giving him what he wants. It's not enough that he might as well be the Sultan already. Jafar wants all the power. His plan at the beginning of the film is to find the magic lamp inside the Cave of Wonders. Using its genie, Jafar can finally take full control of things. When that appears to fizzle, he changes tactics, playing on the Sultan's desperations for finding Princess Jasmine a suitor. If he marries her, that will make Jafar Sultan. A little doctoring of some fine print and a good dose of hypnosis will ensure this until Prince Ali enters the scene. Luckily for Jafar, the prince is really Aladdin thanks to the genie, which brings our villain back to Plan A. Like the best villains, Jafar has a number of tricks up his sleeve, ranging from magic to science to somewhere in between. We've already talked about the snake staff. Inside his secret lair, of course he has a secret lair, we find a machine that can conjure a storm, which in turn fuels his Sands of Time, which can reveal certain people and places in the city. It's never made clear how this works, which adds to the mysticism. His parrot, Iago, is more than a pet, he's a familiar. Jafar is also adept at disguises. His old man getup that he uses to trick Aladdin is so convincing that audiences might not have realized it was him until Iago pokes his head out. Jafar's thirst for power runs deep. He doesn't want to run a good kingdom. The peasants could eat each other for all he cares, as long as they all grovel at the man in charge. When he actually does seize control, he relishes in it. The palace is placed high on a mountaintop, while the citizens of Agrabah are left to fend for themselves. Had he stayed in control, Jafar probably would have gone down to throw his weight around the little people below, but for the time being, he sits and lords over the royal family he spent years kissing up to. The Sultan goes from a figurative puppet ruler to a literal one. Jasmine, the only person who ever really suspected there was something distinctly haram about Jafar, is dressed in a sexy slave girl outfit and forced to serve him. For a final bit of humiliation, Jafar tries to use his last wish to force her to fall in love with him. Not because he has any sort of feelings for her, but because she resisted him. Reflecting his conniving nature, Jafar has a cobra motif that runs throughout the movie. It's most prominent in his staff, with its hypnotic eyes. Andreas Deja explained that it was drawn with a closed mouth for most of the film to save time and budget. When Jafar turns into a sorcerer, the cobra is drawn in more detail, with an open, ready-to-strike mouth, indicating its stronger power. Aside from the staff, Jafar's hourglass has a pair of snakes decorating it. When he takes over the palace, the Sultan's friendly elephant throne becomes a cobra head. And of course, in the final battle against Aladdin, Jafar shows how snake-like he can be by turning into an enormous serpent who probably could have ended our hero if he didn't have a bright idea at the last moment. Even with his quick thinking, Aladdin is up against a pretty powerful foe when he takes on Jafar at the finale. Now, the villain's first wish, to be Sultan, didn't get him very far. While the people of Agrabah, the palace guards, and even the former Sultan himself would have probably just gotten along with it, it's Jasmine who stands up to him. White robes, a floppy turban, and even genie magic might make a sultan, but it doesn't necessarily make a good one. And so, Jafar immediately makes his second, and probably most brilliant wish, to be the world's most powerful sorcerer. This isn't just a wish, you see, it's a loophole. Genies forbid wishing for more wishes, but Jafar has basically created his own magic here. Even if he's not quite as powerful as a genie, he now has the power to grant himself wish after wish. Although he seemingly can't make Jasmine fall in love with him, otherwise he wouldn't have asked Genie, he can do a number of other things, all while keeping the genie as insurance in case he needs to make one more big wish. The sorcerer transformation also gives him an extra pointy new outfit. Talk about your sharp dressers. But of course, even with all that power, Jafar still isn't satisfied. Aladdin catches on and goads Jafar into using his final wish, making himself a genie for that oh-so-tempting phenomenal cosmic power. All too soon, Jafar realizes he's been tricked, because every genie comes with a lamp. Now a prisoner, the good genie blasts him straight to the Cave of Wonders, where he probably would have stayed for 10,000 years if Disney didn't realize the profitability of sequels. But we'll get to that a little later. Right now, let's take a look at Iago. As I detailed earlier, Jafar's parrot went from a refined British sidekick who tried to be a calming presence for his hot-headed master, to a loud-mouthed, angry little guy voiced by Gilbert Gottfried. His name was changed from Sinbad to Iago, after the villain from Othello. The in-story reason for his personality change, as detailed by one of the screenwriters, Terry Rossio, was because Jafar channeled all his rage into the parrot. Iago, being too small to contain so many negative emotions, wound up becoming the Spitfire bird we know and love. His lead animator, Will Finn, was originally on board with the British version. He had just worked on Cogsworth from Beauty and the Beast, and this was essentially the same kind of character, only an evil parrot instead of a cranky clock. After Iago became the extremely vocal, widely comedic character we know and love, Finn was even more ecstatic about being his animator. Making Iago a broader character was intentional. As production on the film continued, everyone realized that Genie was going to be the highlight, with his rapid-fire transformations and jokes. However, this supernatural Robin Williams doesn't show up until about a third into the movie. Iago was essentially meant to warm up the audience, or at least tide them over.
Oh, there's a big surprise! That's an incredible... I think I'm gonna have a heart attack and die from that surprise!
His comedic dialogue is only the half of it, though. As the villain's sidekick, Iago is naturally on the receiving end of a lot of pain. Much like the Beauty and the Beast directors did with LeFou, the Aladdin director's mantra was, when in doubt, hurt the parrot. To paraphrase Finn, Iago is a cruder character than Jafar, but despite their different personalities, they're after the same goal, so they tend to get along. While Jafar holds back his rage for the most part, Iago lets it all out whenever he can. Although they do butt heads as a result, the two of them make a pretty dangerous pair. They're both crafty, and Iago comes up with at least one of their plans when he suggests that Jafar could marry Jasmine in order to become the Sultan. Jafar needs to keep his magical abilities on the down low, so whenever anyone else is around, Iago has to act like a mindless parrot. This is to the delight of the Sultan, who thinks Jafar's pretty Polly is adorable and loves force-feeding him old crackers. It should be obvious, even if he was just a normal bird, that Iago does not appreciate the gesture, but His Majesty isn't all that observant. Lovable as he is, one can't help but feel a little satisfied watching Iago finally turn the tables. Magic or not, Iago is still a parrot and has a skill for imitating voices, doing dead-on impressions of Jasmine and Jafar. It's his princess mimicry that allows him to steal the lamp. Even after Jafar takes the throne, he doesn't forget who helped get him there. Iago gets his own little hat, his own comfy pillow, and in a storyboard, his own pipe. It's almost a shame that their friendship goes south in the end. When Jafar gets sucked into the lamp, Iago, who's been by his side the whole time, finally decides to bail. Almost as an act of passive aggression, or perhaps an attempt to grab something, anything, Jafar snatches the bird and pulls him into the lamp as well. The last we hear is the two of them arguing as Genie flings them far off into the desert. Iago is Jafar's main henchman, but he has more help in the form of the palace guards. Ostensibly, the guards are supposed to be keeping the peace in Agrabah. However, when we meet them, the entire fleet is chasing a single street rat who stole a loaf of bread. In fairness, he has a monkey too. During the chase, Aladdin makes fools of the Sultan's finest, outwitting them at every turn and leaving them stuck in a pile of manure. Based on the dialogue and their persistence, we know this isn't the first time Aladdin's gotten away. This is beyond bread. This is personal. While he's managed to evade the guards thus far, Aladdin does get caught by them twice in the movie, once as himself, and once as Prince Ali. If they have the element of surprise on their side, the guards can actually be somewhat competent. Their leader, voiced by Jim Cummings, is named Razoul, after the movie's layout supervisor, Razoul Azadani. He's called by name quite a few times in the sequels and TV series, but in the first movie, you can only see this in the credits. Azadani's name was also originally meant to summon the Cave of Wonders, but this was considered too much of an inside joke. The more we learn about the guards, the worse they get. They don't actually take orders from the Sultan, but rather Jafar. It turns out that Jafar outranks Jasmine, since they refuse to let Aladdin go when she tells them. Some of this can be excused as just following orders, much like all the guards in Robin Hood when Prince John was in charge, but there's a certain point where it goes too far. When Jafar has the guards kidnap Prince Ali and throw him off a cliff, they don't just go along with it, they enjoy themselves while doing so, especially Razoul. He doesn't even know it's Aladdin, the guy he's been after for who knows how long, and yet he seems to be having a pretty good time brutalizing this royal stranger. Interestingly, we do see a pair of differently dressed guards answering directly to the Sultan when he calls for them to arrest Jafar. Neither of them is ever seen for the rest of the franchise, with Razoul and the other guards somehow keeping their jobs after Jafar's defeat. As more of a point of trivia than anything else, quite a few of the guards have names, which I found thanks to this model sheet. The skinny, dour-looking one is Hakim, the fat one is Fazal, and the hunched-over one is Nabi. All three will continue to appear in the TV series, where the former two's names are also mentioned a few times. Here are the more obscure ones. The one missing a tooth is Gamal, the one with the twisty mustache is Haroun, the especially large one is Brett, and these two generic-looking ones are named Hekel and Jekyll after the cartoon magpies Heckle and Jekyll. The final villain we'll be covering is one of the first characters we meet, Gazeem, voiced by Charlie Adler. The thief's been hired by Jafar to deliver part of the magic scarab used to find the Cave of Wonders, and then go inside for the lamp. We know Jafar plans on killing him when he retrieves it, but the cave does the job first, chomping down on the hapless little guy the moment he sets foot inside. It's a miserable fate, but it's one that he perhaps deserves, given that he callously mentions having to slit a few throats in order to get the scarab half. Although his role is brief, Gazeem does a good job setting up our hero's big entrance by being everything he isn't. Aladdin is a noble thief who only steals to eat, and is still willing to give food to someone who needs it more. Gazeem wouldn't or couldn't do half the things we see Aladdin pull off in the first scene alone. Just to head everyone off in the comments section, I will not be going over Farouk the apple vendor. Not a nice person, but even with his aggressive stance on Thieves, he's still just a guy trying to do his job. I will also not be covering Prince Ahmed because, again, he's not really a villain, just thoroughly unpleasant. And finally, I won't be talking about Jafar's horse because what would I even say about him? Instead, let's strike up the band and go into the movie's music. The Vizier did not have a song in Howard Ashman's original treatment, but as the movie developed, Jafar went on to have quite possibly the most songs written for him out of every other Disney villain. Pretty much each song was meant to be performed at the same point in the story, the scene where Jafar unmasks Prince Ali as merely Aladdin. The first Menken Ashman song was simply titled The Wazir Song, where Jafar and Sinbad have fun ordering the genie to mess with Aladdin at the Sultan's grand ceremony.
The song exists in fragment form, more of a sketch than anything. The final version of the number, and in fact the final song Howard Ashman ever wrote, was called Humiliate the Boy. As in the previous one, Jafar orders Genie to make Aladdin do all sorts of strange and bizarre things in front of the crowd. He also has Genie revert the big Prince Ali entourage to their original forms, Abu and a bunch of vermin. On an especially tragic note, one of the movie's directors, John Musker, once remarked that the song possibly reflected Howard's bitterness at his succumbing to AIDS and the toll it was taking on his body. It's been said that the song was cut due to its cruelty, but that wasn't really the case. After all, it's a villain song. Cruelty comes with the territory. The real reason is because the original plot granted whoever had the genie unlimited wishes. Jafar makes wish after wish in the song, and when the story was changed to only 3, they had to tackle the scene from a different angle. In the making-of book about the Aladdin Broadway musical, Alan Menken mentions writing at least 3 songs with Howard, so there could be more ideas out there that we're unaware of at the moment. After Ashman's passing, Tim Rice came on board as lyricist. His first attempt at a Jafar song was called My Time Will Come, which was reprised with My Time Has Come. These apparently went into Jafar's backstory, explaining how unhappy he's been and how ready he is to make everyone else miserable, but were cut due to being too slow. Another, Master of the Lamp, was a big number with some crazy visuals. The only thing we've been told is that Jafar turns the earth into a ball and bats it around. It was decided that it was too late in the movie for a showstopper.
My Finest Hour was written in a similar fashion to the mob song from Beauty and the Beast, which alternated sung verses with spoken dialogue. Although this was cut as well, the melody remains in the score as Jafar's theme. They tried once more with Why Me, which has the same gist as My Finest Hour, but with a catchier melody and better lyrics. The song appeared to come pretty close to actually making it into the movie, with a fully orchestrated version being recorded. Ultimately, for timing reasons, this song was cut as well. The song actually gives some decent insight into why Jafar does what he does. The opening lyrics state, "In my formative and hungry years, I was unappreciated by my peers. As their slings and arrows flew, I would ponder, wouldn't you? Why me? Why me?" Because he feels that no one ever recognized his greatness, he'll force them by magic. Despite its deletion, Why Me has become a fairly well-known song in its own right. In Aladdin on Ice, Jafar skated to a newly recorded version performed by Jonathan Freedman and Gilbert Gottfried. The song is also featured in the student versions of the Aladdin musical, performed by countless schools and community theaters. It almost made it into the Broadway version as well, but once again wound up getting dropped. At a certain point, they opted to do the scene where Jafar rises to power without a song, but although that worked all right, a villain song would be the perfect way to heighten the moment. Finally, Menken and Rice wrote a short, nasty reprise of Prince Ali, which worked perfectly and didn't slow the scene down. I personally think Why Me would have worked just fine,
But I'm thankful that Jafar managed to get a song at all after so many others were written and discarded. Interestingly, of the songs we've heard, they all end on a creepy, discordant note, with Jafar laughing maniacally.
Jonathan Freedman has a great singing voice, but man, can that guy cackle.
With so much musical theater in its DNA, not to mention Disney's string of successes on Broadway, it's no surprise that Aladdin finally made it to the Great White Way in 2011. In fact, the original Broadway cast featured Jonathan Freedman reprising his role as Jafar. For the most part, the Grand Vizier is not all that different from his role in the animated film. Most of the alterations are for the sake of certain things working on stage better than they would on screen. For example, The opening scene with Gazeem getting chomped by the Cave of Wonders has been entirely removed. Instead, we see Jafar learning about the cave for the first time in his secret lab, with an enchanted book showing him a vision of Aladdin for good measure. Rather than sneaking into the dungeon in his old man disguise, the script takes a page from the original story and has Jafar pretend to be Aladdin's uncle to get the guards off his back. Aladdin's aware of the ruse, but goes along to avoid losing a limb. Similarly, Jafar later tricks Prince Ali into entering Jasmine's chambers, which is forbidden. Ali winds up in the dungeon and needs to use his second wish to get himself and his friends out before Jafar carries out their sentence. Jafar's snake staff is present, but it's just a fancy prop and has no hypnotic abilities. The final confrontation is much shorter, with Jafar using his first wish to capture Jasmine, second to become the Sultan, and third to become a genie. No hourglasses or giant cobras this time around, folks. The technicians work some impressive magic for this show, but they're simply not genies. With that in mind, Iago is not a parrot anymore, but rather a demented little fellow who loyally serves Jafar. As a nod to the original film, he has a tendency to mimic, or parrot, people around him. It's hard to tell if they upped Iago's craziness for the show, or if it's just that seeing his behaviors as a human rather than a bird drives home just how messed up the character really is. I'd say the latter. In addition to the Prince Ali reprise, Jafar and Iago get a brand new song. Alan Menken and Chad Begulin took the scene where the villains tell Aladdin about the Cave of Wonders and wrote A Diamond in the Rough. It's a seduction song where the baddies first tempt Aladdin with all the riches and powers in store. When that doesn't work, they play on his desire to please his late mother. Finally, they mention that he could also win the heart of Jasmine, which makes the street rat play right into their hands. The team also wrote a number called Running the Show that was cut early on. As I mentioned previously, they also considered using Why Me at one point. And now it's time for live-action remakes with Colin, the part of the video where Colin complains about live-action remakes. I hate to sound like a broken record, but what else can I say about these remakes at this point that I haven't already said? It's the animated film we know and love, but with a duller coat of paint. Take Marwan Kenzari as Jafar. He does his best with the role, but lacks the commanding presence of the animated version. One of the things they really drive home in this version is Jafar's inferiority complex. The idea of being second best is not good enough, to the point where he outright kills one of his guards when he reminds Jafar of this. Admittedly, they do explore some interesting territory when it comes to class. Part of the massive chip on Jafar's shoulder is because he resents his background. He was actually a common thief just like Aladdin, which serves as an intriguing parallel between the hero and villain. In fact, Jafar himself manages to pickpocket the lamp off Aladdin in the third act. Where it gets a little messier is the other part of Jafar's backstory. At some point, when he was younger, he spent 5 years in prison in the nearby kingdom of Shirabad. He's harbored a grudge ever since, and constantly urges the Sultan to go to war with them. The Sultan refuses, since they're Agrabah's allies, and it's where his late wife came from. In addition to his Sultan aspirations, Jafar wants to make Agrabah a military superpower, which means getting stronger allies and putting other kingdoms in their place. Like many movies from this era and onward, there's a political undercurrent that gets outright distracting. Classic Jafar is evil with a capital E, while this one has to be a little more subtly sinister. The Sultan is no longer a fun, oblivious little man, but instead a regal, serious character. Thus, Jafar's red flags can't be quite as obvious. Interesting in theory, but the muted takes on the characters just aren't all that interesting or memorable. Once again, in an attempt to add a semblance of realism to the story, they wound up removing a large part of its soul. When the animated Jafar becomes sorcerer, he does all sorts of crazy things. Making Abu into a wind-up monkey, breathing fire, humiliating the Sultan, transforming into a giant snake. This Jafar barely does any of that, opting instead to essentially use the Force to inflict pain on the heroes. It's threatening, I suppose, but where's the panache? Even his musical identity seems diluted. Jafar had a very distinct theme in the 90s movie. Not only does this Jafar not get a song, but the Finest Hour melody barely gets played at all in the underscore. There's not really a new theme to replace it either. This has been a very strange trend in the remakes. Even with Alan Menken and Hans Zimmer coming back to write the scores, Gaston, Jafar, Scar, and Ursula's themes are mostly hinted at, while they were much more recognizable before. I really have no idea why this has been happening. If Jafar's a less interesting version of himself, then Iago suffers even worse. He's a largely non-anthropomorphic parrot. I suppose this isn't the worst thing, because unlike Abu, he isn't outright unpleasant to look at. But it's hard not to miss his original voice and mannerisms. Not only is he not as funny, but he's also a little confusing. Classic Iago had to keep his intelligence a secret. New Iago, voiced by Alan Tudyk, is constantly muttering little sarcastic asides that no one seems to notice. Jafar is aware he's more than an average bird, and does briefly converse with him at a few points, but the rest of the palace seems oblivious to the fact that Iago is doing more than just parroting what he's heard. Only the otherwise idiotic Prince Anders ever seems to pick up on this, and I genuinely can't tell if that's supposed to be the joke or not. Iago helps Jafar out at several points. He alerts Jafar to Aladdin's presence in the palace, and later steals the keys to the dungeon to let his master out. His big moment, and I do mean big, is when Sorcerer Jafar turns him into a giant bird resembling the legendary roc to chase down Aladdin and Jasmine during the climax. It's nice to see Iago in the spotlight, but it's a poor substitute for the Cobra fight, especially since he basically chases them in a big circle. Helpful as he is, his friendship with Jafar is totally absent. This parrot is definitely more of a pet than a sidekick. This makes Jafar yanking him into the lamp as he gets sucked inside not really hit the same way. Finally, the character of Razoul is replaced by Hakim, played by Numan Akar. The stern captain of the guard is steadfastly allied with the Sultan. His loyalty is put to the test when Jafar wishes himself to be the new Sultan, but a rousing speech from Jasmine helps him remember who he should really be serving. Most of the other guards stand with Hakim, but they're a pair of unnamed men who stay loyal to Jafar. Earlier in the movie, they help him try to bump off Prince Ali as well. At a certain point, they just sort of vanish from the action, although I had to actively pay attention to minor details to even catch this. Now that we've covered the different versions of the original story, let's move on to its animated follow-ups. As I said a few times in previous videos, 1994's Return of Jafar opened the floodgates for the Disney sequels glut that lasted into the late 2000s. If you watched my Darkwing Duck video, you'll remember I got to interview the series creator Tad Stones. Mr. Stones was kind enough to come back for a second interview, as he oversaw both sequels and the Aladdin TV series. I'll have the full interview up in a separate video. The sequel takes place not long after the first movie. Right off the bat, we're introduced to a new villain, Abis Mal, but we'll discuss him in more detail when we get to the show. As we've seen, the Cave of Wonders is next to impossible to enter, but getting out is doable if you're a genie or a very determined parrot. After a lot of exhausting digging, Iago, still partially stuck in the lamp, manages to tunnel his way out of the underground cavern. While he and Jafar were the best of buddies before this whole mess, familiarity has bred contempt. A few months in close quarters, arguing and blaming each other for their fate, has caused a major rift for the villains. Instead of rubbing the lamp and letting the now genified Jafar out for revenge, Iago dumps him down a well and strikes out on his own. Return of Jafar served as the pilot for the Aladdin TV series, and according to Stones, one of the most important things about the movie was explaining how Iago wound up on the good guy side.
And I said, I want that bird in our show, because to have a semi-reformed crook as part of the team of heroes, I just knew there'd be friction, there'd be humor, it'd be fun, we'd have Gilbert, all of which is true. So that was like, how do we bring him back? He went into the lamp, and that started, well, okay, we got to bring back Jafar.
Aladdin might be the hero, and Jafar might be the title character, but make no mistake, this is Iago's movie. The first third has some business with Aladdin and Jasmine getting in a fight and then reconciling, but for the most part, the story is all about Iago learning what actual friendship is. At first, he tries to gain Aladdin's sympathies, which doesn't work in the slightest. After accidentally saving Al's life, really, Iago was selfishly getting a little revenge against their pursuers, the parrot points out that Aladdin owes him one. Then, when Aladdin sticks up for him, even when it would have been easier to cut his losses and let the bird get skewered, Iago develops a small but vocal conscience. Very quickly, the obnoxious little imp decides that being on the hero's side isn't all that bad, even if it means doing something nice every now and then. This is put to the test when Jafar returns. Clearly, poor Iago wasn't aware of the movie's title, and intimidates the bird into serving him once again. Scared for his life, Iago double-crosses Aladdin, but for the first time, he doesn't enjoy the treachery. Such is the burden of knowing right from wrong. Speaking of Jafar, although this is a much smaller scale movie, they do a good job at making the villains scarier than ever. As a genie, Jafar is truly a force to be reckoned with. We only got a small taste of what he was capable of in the first movie, but this one more than makes up for things. He doesn't need a snake staff anymore, but carries it around for old time's sake. I also noticed they gave him something of a spider motif for a few scenes, as opposed to cobras. The movie wisely has him spend a decent amount of screen time as both a genie and a human. Jafar was crafty as a human, and that hasn't stopped him in his new form. In fact, it's gotten even worse. You see, Jafar is aware that just because a genie grants wishes, they also have a fair amount of leeway. For comparison's sake, the good blue genie is 100% honest and upfront. When Aladdin tricks him into letting them out of the cave without using a wish, Genie admits it was clever and doesn't retaliate. Later, though, when it's in his best interest to rescue Aladdin from drowning, he can't do it unless his master makes a wish. He can be cheated, but he can't consciously cheat himself. It's like how a cartoon character can walk on air, but only if they're not aware they're doing it. The second they look down, they fall. Genie does sort of cheat by goading an unconscious Aladdin into sort of kind of making a wish, but he generally tries to color within the lines even if he doesn't want to. Jafar, meanwhile, doesn't have these scruples. He wants his new master, Abis Mal, to use his wishes to free him. When Abis refuses, Jafar effortlessly tricks him out of his first two wishes in order to ensure the greedy thief only has one left. There's also the matter of genie rules. Like in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill. Although Jafar is bound by this, even with all his phenomenal cosmic powers, he can find a loophole. He can't just zap Aladdin, but he can set off a chain of events that could lead to Aladdin's death, which is exactly what he does. Transforming himself into a group of sinister, cloaked bandits, riding horses with bat wings I might add, Jafar kidnaps the Sultan and leaves Aladdin unconscious. Then, he perfectly mimics Jasmine and sentences Aladdin to death for allegedly killing the Sultan. He would have gotten away with it too, if it weren't for that meddling parrot. Even as a genie, Jafar has a weakness. According to the good genie, they're bound to their lamps. If Jafar's lamp is destroyed, he goes with it. Presumably, as a free genie, the blue guy doesn't have the same affliction. The heroes all go after the lamp, either to smash it or use a wish to buy them a little time. Jafar goes all out in destruction mode. Once again, he can't directly kill anyone, but turning the palace grounds into a game of the floor is made of lava apparently isn't against the rules. Go figure. In the end, it's Iago who knocks the lamp into the lava, saving the day and earning his place in the palace. According to Stones, the reason they killed Jafar off, rather than have him return in more episodes of the show, was because there wasn't much more they could have really done with the character.
So it was just like, couldn't figure out how to do it. I don't even think I gave it much thought because the whole point was we had to get rid of him. Because he could not survive powerfully. And if we had some way of, he gets turned back into the human, then he's just another guy, without power, actually, because he wouldn't be the prime minister. He wouldn't have any of the stuff that made Jafar deceitful and all of that.
On a slightly lesser note, although they no longer serve Jafar, the royal guards are still a major thorn in Aladdin's side, especially Razoul. The captain acts as if he's always been firmly on the side of the royal family. When the Sultan orders him to take care of Iago, he doesn't hesitate with his sword. The fact that it was his old boss's pet isn't brought up. Later, when the disguised Jafar orders Aladdin's execution, Razoul is more than happy to carry out the order. He's clearly ecstatic every step of the way, relishing in the twisted pomp and circumstance of the whole affair. This is more than getting rid of an enemy of the state. This is personal. Yes, he's being manipulated. Yes, he's now a loyal servant of the Sultan and the princess as opposed to the vizier. But if he has a chance to take Aladdin's life in a legally approved way, he will leap on it. The look of disappointment on his face when Genie saves Al is brief, but priceless. Somewhat infamously, this movie has Gilbert Gottfried sing in 2 separate musical numbers. Forget About Love won't be discussed here, as it's not really a villain song. At that point in the story, Iago's already coming around to the good side. His other song, I'm Looking Out for Me, written by Randy Peterson and Kevin Quinn, is more conventional. The jazzy number has Iago explain that he could never actually trust anyone, not even Jafar, so he's off to live a solo, selfish life. After having so many songs written and cut, Jafar finally gets to let loose with a full-length, proper showstopper in You're Only Second Rate, also by Peterson and Quinn. While Genie loves to use his shape-shifting powers for fun, Jafar mostly uses his for means of deceit. His song is an exception, where the villain gets a chance to show off his own transformations, all to torment Genie and Abu. He even adapts Genie's love of pop culture and anachronistic humor. This is Jafar at his silliest, with immortal lyrics like Zabba Cabadabra, Granny's gonna grab ya. Even bad guys need a chance to have a little fun, and by the end, it's unfortunately clear who the stronger Genie is. This also taps into a deeper part of Jafar's psyche. His whole life, he's resented being second best, which is why he wished to be a genie in the first place. Now he has a chance to show that he's the better of the 2 genies, at least where power is concerned. No wonder he's having so much fun. The underscore by Mark Waters draws heavily from Alan Menken's original soundtrack, to the point where it's a little distracting at times. There is some originality still to be found, though. In the first movie, Iago never had his own theme. Now that he's such a major character, Waters writes a lovably sneaky little piece for the parrot. At the end of the sequel, Aladdin and Jasmine decide to put off settling down and explore the world together first, leading into one of Disney's best TV series based on a movie. Now Iago is one of the good guys, although he doesn't always act like it. At heart, he's still a greedy, cowardly sidekick, but there's more to him than just that. Being around Aladdin has been good for the parrot, as it's allowed him to develop a moral side. Now that he understands the value of friendship, he's more willing to help out. Although he often tries to avoid going on one of their crazy adventures, unless there's treasure involved, Iago has saved the heroes' lives multiple times. It may be why they bring him in the first place. He's more of an asset to the team than he even realizes. On one hand, it would be nice if Iago could see the goodness in himself more often. He outwardly takes pride in his cowardice, but we've seen that he actually dreams of being a brave hero like Aladdin. In actuality, Iago has had plenty of moments in the series where he's acted with heroism and done the right thing, even when it doesn't benefit him. On the other hand, Iago is still a prideful character who would easily let this kind of thing go to his head. Maybe it's for the best that he never quite realizes his full potential, as that might ironically hold him back. One thing is for sure, Iago does secretly enjoy going on adventures. One episode had Jasmine leave him and Abu behind for their own safety. By the end, Iago has led Abu into battle, convinced that they need to save their friends. As it turns out, the mission had already been accomplished, but it's the thought that counts. As I said, a huge motivator for Iago is treasure. Gold, jewels, riches, money, etc. It's gotten him into some major trouble in the past. He's tried at a few points to outright steal from the Sultan, which once got him kicked out of the palace. He shares this trait with Abu, who is just as gung-ho about thievery, even while living in luxury. Although their one real interaction in the original movie was a negative one, it's not really a surprise that Abu and Iago have become so close in the series. In addition to their kleptomaniac tendencies, they also have the whole animal sidekick thing in common. You get the feeling that they understand things about each other that no one else really could. It's not a perfect friendship, of course. Iago, being the smarter one, likes to manipulate Abu into helping him with the schemes, and is quick to throw the monkey under the bus if they get caught. At the same time, if left to his own devices, Abu would be stealing things anyway, so you can't even call Iago that bad an influence. The addition of Iago to the main cast was a great call in general. He gives off villainous energy sometimes without actually being a villain anymore, and it makes the moments where he helps the good guys even more satisfying. Plus, he's funny as ever. The show wouldn't be the same without him. The royal guards are present as well. Although Return of Jafar didn't show him at his best, it did make clear that Razoul is now totally loyal to the Sultan, which continues throughout the series. Although he still resents Aladdin and gives him trouble whenever he can, the show also lets him have a few genuinely heroic moments. He saves Al's life at several points, even when he could have looked the other way. He's even begrudgingly admitted that the former street rat may be a great leader someday. In his starring episode, Destiny on Fire, he and Aladdin get stuck together with a magical chain that will only break when the two are able to agree on something. When they're actually able to work together, Aladdin and Razoul make a surprisingly good team. The captain's greatest moment, though, came in an episode when the Sultan is possessed by an evil suit of armor. The not-Sultan orders Jasmine's execution. Razoul, once again dressed for the occasion, opts to help Jasmine escape instead, even though he's putting his own life on the line. Maybe Jafar had more influence over him than we realized. It does seem that the writing team took inspiration from Grizzlikoff, the grouchy shush agent in Darkwing Duck. Both characters serve the heroes, but hate the main character and feel that he doesn't always deserve his acclaim. A couple other guards receive a bit more development as well. Fazal is given a love of food, and Hakim has a tired, blasé attitude. Neither one seems to have a consistent actor, with different episodes giving them different voices. Just like the 1001 Arabian Nights, Aladdin may as well have 1001 enemies introduced throughout the show. He has a fantastic rogues gallery on display. It really says something that even without Jafar and all his malice, the old vizier doesn't feel all that missed. The new group of bad guys are distinct in their own right, so let's dive in. I don't know if I can call our first villain Aladdin's new archenemy, but he had the most appearances, including Return of Jafar. After skimming over his role in that movie, let's give Abis Mal the attention he deserves, and even if he didn't, it's the attention he'd certainly demand. If you groaned at that pun of a name, you'd better brace yourself. These are the same people who worked on Rescue Rangers and Darkwing Duck. This is just the beginning. we're introduced to this villain as the leader of a group of bandits. While his men seem pretty competent, their leader is anything but. Abis Mal, voiced by Jason Alexander, is clumsy, cowardly, and too dumb to realize that his boorish behavior is getting under the other's skin. There are several moments where his bandits are this close to slicing him up, only for something lucky to save him at the last second. Although he's never been able to truly succeed, Abis does have a remarkable amount of luck, especially when it comes to finding dangerous magical artifacts that he can use against his enemies. We see this right off the bat when he happens to pull Jafar's lamp out of the well. Abis's problem is that although he has a knack for obtaining these items, he rarely knows how to properly use them. Jafar is quick to take advantage of his hapless master, but there have been plenty of other times when it's Abis's own incompetence that messes him up. Still, no matter what humiliating defeats he suffers at the hands of Aladdin, Abis Mal just keeps coming back, ready with a new scheme or weapon that he's sure will get him on the throne. He's actually had the good guys on the ropes a surprising number of times. He's easily outsmarted, but he's not to be underestimated. Although he regards Aladdin with the utmost disdain, Abis also has a special hatred for the genie, who has played a major role in foiling many of his plans. In fact, in some episodes, he acts like he hates the genie even more. Like many of your classic villains, Abis wants to take over the kingdom. He also has an obsession with hats. He's fully convinced that the headwear makes the man, and forever wants to switch his hat out with something bigger and fancier, say the Sultan's turban. At a few points, it seems like he's more focused on getting a big hat than getting the big palace, much to the annoyance of his henchman, how rude has he been? Harood, voiced by James Avery, is much smarter than his boss. Not that that's exactly a major feat. Watching the series, you might wonder why Harood would belittle himself by serving such an incompetent person. It's because he recognizes Abis's ability to actually follow through. As much of a screw-up as he may be, Abis Mal has major ambitions and somehow finds a way to almost pull his plans off. Maybe not to a total victory, as he's never successfully kept the throne, but he's come closer to getting it than a number of Aladdin's arguably more dangerous adversaries. If Harood is willing to be a yes-man and subtly guide Abis in the right direction, he'll be there to share the spoils. Believe me, Abis needs all the help he can get. He loves to boast, but often can't think of the right word, meaning Harood will have to help fill in the blanks. Sometimes Harood will also have to lay out the obvious next step in what is meant to be Abis's master plan. There are some advantages to being smarter than your boss. When Abis orders Harood to do something unpleasant, Harood will in turn use reverse psychology to make the task sound like an honor. This prompts Abis to do it himself, often with painful results. Essentially, it's the old Tom Sawyer whitewashing the fence tactic, one that Abis has never picked up on. That being said, when he absolutely needs to get his hands dirty, Harood has proven to be a decent fighter, even doing a good job of taking on Aladdin himself. At the end of the day though, he's happier to be a follower than a leader, even if it's for someone like Abis Mal. The interplay between the characters is a lot of fun, and was for this reason, along with the voice actors' performances, that they were used so frequently.
As we recorded him, it was like very funny. He had a henchman that he always interrelated with, was very dry, and those guys working back and forth. It just added a nice, instead of saying, oh, let's have another generic thug, it was like, this is really a personality we can get to know, who can cause trouble but is not too formidable.
I'll hit him with my turn a man inside out spell.
Just remember to look away this time.
Whoa, yes, the nightmares.
Harood did not appear in Return of Jafar, which is for the best, since it would have complicated the plot. Part of the reason the story flows so well is because Abis is such a good comic foil for the main villain, and because he's selfish, weak-willed, and foolish enough to let himself get used by Jafar. Abis's other gang members I mentioned appeared sporadically throughout the series, but he was generally paired up with Harood only. The other underlings seemed to come and go. They came close to betraying him in the movie, so it's a little bizarre seeing them come back. At other points, they've popped up as generic thugs in crowd scenes. A time travel episode introduces us to Abis Mal's ancestor, Abnor Mal. While he has his descendants' entitled attitude, Abnor actually seems like a halfway decent person who's content to be a tent maker in a wandering caravan. Really, his worst attribute is that he's a naysayer. The leader, Hamed, is the man who will one day found Agrabah, but Abnor doesn't think the patch of desert would make a good settlement. All he cares about is his tent business. It's when Abis travels back in time and fills his ancestor's head with the idea of seizing power that Abnor turns fully bad. As it turns out, he didn't need that much of a push. The date doesn't fall far from the tree, I guess. Abis' meddling ends up sentencing Abnor to a life of exile, while Aladdin and the rest inspire Hamed to build what will become Agrabah. Gotta keep the timeline stable after all. It's interesting that, had Abis not interfered, his lineage may have been a nice one. Or at least a nicer one. As much as he hates Aladdin and the genie, Abis Mal really is his own worst enemy. Abis might have been the most frequently appearing villain, but if there's one standout bad guy, it had to be Mozenrath, voiced by Jonathan Brandis and named after two of the series' writers, Bill Motz and Bob Roth. Despite being around Aladdin's age, he's become one of the most powerful figures in the Seven Deserts. Mozenrath rules over the land of the Black Sand. Its former ruler, Disdain, was a sorcerer so notorious that even Jafar avoided him. Disdain raised Mozenrath as an apprentice, almost like a father. And how did the trainee thank his father figure? By usurping him, stealing his powers, and reducing him to a Mamluk, one of many mindless undead soldiers. We've got another megalomaniac on our hands. Mozenrath's kingdom is one of dark magic, and he has plenty of wicked tools and charms to help him. His plans have included summoning a fearsome windjackal to destroy anything he commands, capturing a beast from another world that devours magic in order to take down other kingdoms' defenses, and hunting down various other artifacts. He definitely has his eye on the genie, and has captured him several times in order to harness his semi-phenomenal, nearly cosmic power. His most dangerous weapon has to be his gauntlet, which allows him to use magic in the first place. Without it, he's defenseless. Getting it off is the challenge, of course, and even though he's lost it once or twice, he manages to get it back for future episodes. The gauntlet may be the key to his power, but it's also the key to his possible downfall. Magic comes at a cost, and the glove is slowly sapping Mozenrath of his life. Not only is it snazzy, but it also conceals its effects. Mozenrath's arm has been reduced to a skeleton. In his final appearance, we learn that the gauntlet is draining Mozenrath faster than we realized, and he doesn't have long for this world. He plans to swap bodies with Aladdin in order to prolong his life, which of course fails. The last time we see him, Mozenrath is trapped in a hot air balloon, courtesy of Genie, without his gauntlet. Is the evil sorcerer still out there? Did he find another magic weapon that wasn't so hazardous to his health? Or did that gauntlet finally do the job and take his life? Who can say? Although Mozenrath was created about halfway into the show's run, he's emerged as one of the fan favorites. He was a significant threat, he had a snide, sadistic sense of humor, and his episodes tended to be memorable. When Iago calls him Jafar Jr., it doesn't feel unearned.
Think of it as a test. The good news is, you passed.
A test? People could have been hurt.
And your point would be?
Although Mozenrath is a solid Jafar replacement, if such a thing could exist, his sidekick is not quite up to par with Iago. Xerxes, voiced by Frank Welker, is hard to describe exactly. He's a floating eel, slug, pike, worm thing. He's unpleasant, that's what he is. With a slobbering Igor-like personality, Xerxes loyally serves his master, no matter how much abuse Mozenrath dishes out. The creature isn't the brightest, but he's not totally dumb either. He makes a decent spy, he's tripped up the good guys a surprising amount of times, and he adds an extra bit of creepy flair to an already threatening villain. Mozenrath and Xerxes don't have the same friendship that Jafar and Iago once shared. You don't get those moments where they commiserate with each other or come up with a wicked plan as a team. It's clear who wears the pants, especially since Xerxes doesn't wear pants at all, I don't think he could, and yet his presence does suggest something about Mozenrath. He needs company. He needs someone to talk to, someone to cheer him on. Without Xerxes, all he has is a kingdom of zombies. Useful zombies, yes, but they'll never appreciate his greatness. Ugly and nasty as he is, Xerxes is a reminder that even someone like Mozenrath has a soul and a need for some kind of companion. As a fun little tidbit, I found a page from one of the episode scripts that had this for Xerxes' character description. Mozenrath's favorite stooge, and you thought it was Shemp. Next up is Mechanicles, voiced by Charlie Adler, the self-proclaimed greatest of the Great Greek geniuses. He's certainly smart, but his intelligence is cancelled out by his insanity. The villain specializes in giant mechanical bugs that he has do his bidding. Ironically, he finds real insects disgusting. Actually, he finds everything disgusting. Mechanicles has some major OCD. Although he'd most likely be just as evil without his disorder, it's that same OCD that often feeds into his evil plots. Per Tad Stones, the idea of this mentally ill mad genius was more or less an Arabian Nights version of Darkwing Duck's Megavolt. Although his main goals are to take over the world and get vengeance on Aladdin after the pesky hero stopped his initial conquest,
Mechanicles will occasionally do something crazy and destructive in order to cleanse the world of germs and anything that carries them. Once, he tried to suck up the world's oceans to power a steam cleaner to give the planet a once-over. Another time, he tried to level the world's rainforests, citing them as a major source of disease. He realizes that if he were to succeed, it would kill the Earth, but it would be worth it to make everything perfectly clean, if only for a moment. In addition to his neatness obsession, Mechanicles' other major idiosyncrasy is to write things down on his endless to-do list. This is actually quite helpful, as it helps him schedule his schemes to a T, always having a counter-strike or backup plan ready.
People might ask, why install a net?
Mechanicles!
5 more nets.
He can even calculate the exact second when Aladdin and the others will come crashing in to foil his nefarious plans. Not that it's ever actually helped him defeat the heroes, but his accuracy is impressive. Out of all his robo-creations, Mechanicles has a particular favorite in a giant scarab named Scooter. While he's something of a sidekick to the Greek genius, Mechanicles doesn't treat him with the same kind of affection we've seen other villains extend to their pets. Scooter doesn't really display much of a personality, which is no doubt how Mechanicles likes it. Pesky things like personalities and free will are so inconvenient, especially when sticking to a schedule. This was even more clear when Mechanicles teamed up with Abis Mal. They discover that Mal's latest find, colored stones that affect the holder's personality, pair perfectly with Mechanicles' little scarabs. If the bugs hold the stones and then sit on a person, the person's emotions will in turn be affected. One stone causes fear, another jealousy, etc., etc. Together, the villains trap Aladdin and his friends and use the stones to mess with them, making them easier to dispose of. Aladdin triumphs as always, but not without a few close calls. The thing is, Mechanicles and Abis Mal are not evenly matched partners. It's Mechanicles who has the intelligence and planning, while all Abis can offer is his treasure. Since Mechanicles has never shown any kind of honor, I'm surprised he didn't just steal the stones and use them himself without Abis Mal, who mostly gets in the way. I'm not surprised that the two of them never worked together again after that. The only one of his creations to display any real personality is Gregarious, a robot voiced by Jim Cummings. He's a real charmer and manages to worm his way into the palace with little effort. That's not because of his friendly nature, though. It's because of his hypnotism skills. He's so well programmed that he puts Jafar's snake staff to shame, enchanting almost everyone. Only Genie and Carpet are unaffected, since their magical natures apparently make them immune. This means it's up to them to snap everyone out of it, before they let Greg's good friend Mechanicles take over. Given his Greek nationality, and the fact that Jafar once teamed up with Hades, more on that in a bit, it's surprising that Mechanicles didn't make his own guest appearance in the Hercules cartoon. The closest thing we got was a split-second glimpse at a villain during a fantasy sequence who resembled Mechanicles, but had a different design. Go figure. Out of Aladdin's huge rogues gallery, our next villain, Mirage, probably stands out as the scariest. While most of the other bad guys are motivated by a thirst for power, Mirage just wants to be as malicious as possible. Described as both evil incarnate and an evil elemental, she's the closest the franchise has to pure evil. Tad Stone said his favorite episodes were the ones that leaned into the Arabian Nights mythology, and Mirage is one of his creations. Her design is based more on Egyptian deities, giving her a cat's head on a human body. Her sphinx-like hideout in the mysterious limbo land of Morbia also leans into the Egyptian aesthetic. Most of her appearances are heralded by the sound of a large cat yowling. Voiced by BB Newirth, Mirage is bad news, probably worse news than Mozenrath and even Jafar. They want to conquer the world, she just wants to see it burn, and make sure everyone is in as much agony as possible during the bonfire.
Chalk up another one for the forces of evil. Now, let's see what other hopes are due for demolition.
True to her name, she specializes in illusions and deceit. In several episodes, she messes with the heroes' minds, making them think they've escaped, while actually trapping them in her shadow realm. She was even able to once conjure an entire fake Agrabah. Curiously, the series once hinted that Mirage was not always the embodiment of evil. Fazir, a mysterious seer who often helped Aladdin out throughout the series, mentions at the end of one episode that he and Mirage were once a romantic item. In fact, she used to be with him on the side of good. Whatever happened to turn Mirage into what she is now is up to the fanfic writers. In her darkest episode, Mirage is revealed to be behind a series of child disappearances that happen on 3 nights every 7 years. She seeks out youngsters with big ambitions and small moral compasses. Promising them power, she turns them into monsters called El Khatib that serve as her slaves. It's very much in the vein of Pinocchio's coachman, but even he let the boys have a little fun on Pleasure Island before their horrible transformation. When one of the El Khatib, once Aladdin's childhood friend Amal, revolts, Mirage spitefully leaves him to die in the sunlight. Like vampires, these monsters are killed by the sun. Just for the heck of it, she leaves a number of other El Khatib to die, even though they had nothing to do with any of this. Because he managed to find his humanity at the last minute, Amal is actually spared, but the other beasts aren't so lucky. Mirage just goes off to lick her wounds, not caring a bit about the children she's tricked, transformed, and ultimately killed. Scary as she is, there's one being that even Mirage fears. Chaos, voiced by Matt Frewer, might look like a cute winged cat with a pleasant vacant smile, but don't be fooled. Imagine what would happen if you gave the Cheshire Cat godlike powers, and that's Chaos in a nutshell. He pops in only once in a very memorable episode where Mirage tries to sick him on Agrabah, saying it's a dreadfully boring place. If there's one thing Chaos hates, it's boredom, and his ideas of excitement range from silly to earth-shatteringly destructive. I won't give away the ending, since this one's definitely worth a watch. That, and if you knew how things turned out, it would be a little boring, which would go against what Chaos stands for in the first place. While many of Aladdin's rogues are conventional enemies, maniacs, monsters, and thieves who want to ruin our hero and his friends, our next character is different. She doesn't want to hurt Aladdin. In fact, she loves him. Unfortunately, sometimes love can bring out your crazy side. Sadira, voiced by Kelly Martin, is a young thief, a street rat herself who becomes enamored with Al when he saves her from the guards. She's disappointed when he says he already has someone special in his life, and then shattered when she finds out it's the princess. How can she compete with royalty? She gets her chance when she literally stumbles upon some ancient tomes left behind by the legendary Witches of the Sand. Deciding that this is the key to her dream man, Sadira starts studying and attacks the gang at several points with different spells meant to A. win Aladdin, and B. get Jasmine and whoever else out of the way. Her plans include creating a sand monster to capture Jasmine, rewriting reality so that she's the princess and Jasmine is a street rat, and finally brainwashing Aladdin into thinking he's her knight in shining armor. When we first meet Sadira, even though she hasn't turned to villainy yet, she still comes across as a little unstable.
He and I, we're two of a kind. We belong together, and we're going to be together, one way or another.
Some of this can be chalked up to her age. Her voice and mannerisms make her sound a little younger than Aladdin, and teenagers are not really known for being rational thinkers, especially when hormones are involved. It's why she isn't willing to let go or use her amazing magical skills for something other than snagging a boyfriend. My wife even pointed out that she could very well have used those powers to conjure herself a man, maybe even an Aladdin clone. Admittedly, that could have ended badly, as most of Sadira's plots tend to. She might have the spells, but she's an amateur and rarely thinks them through. They often blow up in her face, making them her problem just as much as Aladdin's. In her penultimate episode, she tries to kidnap a hypnotized Al into a fantasy world she's created. Although Genie prevents her from spiriting our hero away, he's unable to break the spell on Aladdin, meaning that everyone has to work together to snap him back to reality. Things get even more out of hand, and Sadira winds up bonding with Jasmine of all people. This experience seems to finally help her get over Aladdin, realizing that all she ever really wanted was friends. Even her crush on Aladdin was born out of someone doing something nice for her, which had never happened before. Understandably, Aladdin takes a while to trust Sadira, but when the Witches of Sand return to take over Agrabah, it's Sadira who ultimately saves everyone, almost sacrificing herself in the process. This cements their friendship, to the point where Sadira can be seen at the wedding in the final scene of King of Thieves. I've heard arguments that Sadira was never really a villain in the first place, but I have to disagree. She did some pretty messed up things in order to get what she wanted. Changing reality in order to marry Aladdin, hypnotize him, remove his entire sense of self, and try to steal him away from his friends and his home. She's more than redeemed herself, but let's face it, she was a villain for more than half of her screen time. Aladdin had a much more evil-obsessed lady in the form of Saleen, a mermaid voiced by Julie Brown. With her prominent red hair, it's hard not to be reminded of a certain other Disney mermaid, which the show is quick to poke fun at.
She looks like every other princess under the sea.
Unlike Ariel and the rest of Atlantica, Saleen is not a friendly mermaid. Instead, she resembles mythical sirens who cause destruction for fun. Her true nature is hinted at in her design. Unlike the traditional mermaid, her fish half resembles a lionfish, much like some concept art ideas for Ursula. Saleen's grown tired of shipwrecks and decides to tank a relationship instead. After imprisoning Jasmine in her enchanted waters, Saleen sets out to claim Aladdin as her man. As opposed to Sadira, who despite her crazy tendencies, really was obsessed with Al, Saleen just wants to win her cruel little game. She may find Aladdin attractive, but she'd probably discard him the moment something else came along. Luckily, Aladdin isn't as fickle as the mermaid hopes he is, and he and Jasmine outwit Saleen in the end. Of course, if Saleen was petty enough to mess with Al and Jasmine in the first place, then she's more than likely to seek revenge. In her second and final appearance, she uses her magic to turn Aladdin into a shark slave. She's having a lot of fun with her new fish boy toy, which doesn't sit well for her octopus sidekick, Armand, creature voices by Frank Welker. Armand has been serving Saleen for a long time, not just as her muscle, but also her hairstylist. With those 8 arms, he has a real gift. It's a little hazy if he sees himself as a royal pet, or possibly even harbors romantic feelings for her, but either way, his jealousy of Aladdin is palpable. It gets so bad that he discreetly helps Genie, Abu, and Iago trap Saleen and break the spell on Al so he can get his mermaid back. It seems to work, as Saleen is thankful when Armand comes to her rescue, blissfully unaware that he just worked against her a few hours ago. What she doesn't know won't hurt her, and more importantly, it won't hurt Armand. Jasmine had a stalker as well, although he only targeted her in his first appearance. When Aladdin finds a treasure chest with a beautiful necklace inside, he naturally gives it to the princess. Turns out the jewelry is cursed, and whoever wears it is supernaturally betrothed to our next villain. Ayam Aghoul, voiced by Hamilton Camp, is a hideous undead creature accompanied by a group of skeleton servants. They're not just his helpers, they're all his previous wives, who form the world's creepiest undead harem. Jasmine is doomed to join their jamboree, unless Aladdin can figure out a way to remove the necklace. It goes without saying that our heroes succeed, and Ayam is banished back to the Netherworld without Jasmine. If he was relegated to that one appearance, there wouldn't be much else to say, other than describing him as a less funny version of Beetlejuice. But our ghoul doesn't take his defeat lying down. It turns out there's more than one way to escape the Netherworld. Ayam appears to largely forget all about Jasmine, and focuses his vengeance on Aladdin. In his next appearances, he makes several attempts to either escape the land of the dead, or drag Aladdin over to the other side. The show is vague about what exactly the Netherworld is like. One episode shows it as a shadow version of Agrabah, where the living can be seen and heard, but not actually interacted with. Although the Sultan's dead grandfather is sticking around, you'd think there'd be more ghosts. Perhaps we're only getting a taste of the afterlife, and there are more layers that can't be covered in the span of one episode. What we do know for sure is that Aghoul has plenty of monsters at his disposal, ready to snare the heroes if they get close to his domain. Although he's not one of the more frequent villains, he has a certain relentlessness about him. Being dead, he has all the time in the world to find ways to get revenge. On a decidedly sillier note, we have Amin Damoola, voiced by Jeff Bennett. This clumsy villain can often be found hanging around the Skull and Dagger, a seedy restaurant meant for thieves only. He's the laughingstock of the joint, nicknamed Butterfingers due to his incompetence. Amin always vows to prove himself, and sadly always fails. It's not that he's a terribly likable person, but after seeing him get kicked around and outright used as a footstool, you want to see him succeed a little. He did get revenge on his peers once when, with Abu's help, he steals the 5 Fingers of Discount, a gauntlet with a magical, magnetic effect on treasure. Using the artifact, he manages to scare everyone at the Skull and Dagger for a few glorious moments of victory before Aladdin and the others step in. Immediately, Amin is Butterfingers again, chased off by the rest of the thieves. In another episode, Amin shows up at the palace using a number of dangerous magic weapons. Fortunately for the heroes, Amin is even less adept at using them than someone like Abis Mal and botches things. It turns out that Mozenrath hired him and gave him the tools, but being such a Butterfingers, Amin just isn't up to the task. And you know, when you're described as a less threatening Abis Mal, it means that maybe being a master thief just isn't in the cards. Incompetent as he is, Amin still managed to show up in 4 episodes, which is more than the following villains can say. Of course, a 3-episode run isn't such a bad thing. Nefir Hasenuf, voiced by René Aubergenois, manages to be a real thorn in the good guy's side thrice. He's an imp who, in the world of Aladdin, are drawn to look like diminutive Egyptian deities with animal heads on human bodies. They also have bat wings. As you could probably surmise from his name, Nefir possesses a greed that could even rival Iago. And while the parrot is a crafty one when it comes to getting what he wants, Nefir has even more means for his ill-gotten gains. Imps are skilled builders, able to build massive weapons and entire cities in the span of moments. Their work doesn't come cheap, and Nefir likes to nickel and dime, or rather shekel and denier, his clients for all they're worth. The villainy comes in with just how they go about getting those clients. In his first appearance, Nefir puts a pair of cursed shoes on a giant rhinoceros that make him dance uncontrollably when he hears music. Using this, the imps force him to dance a nearby Las Vegas-style city into rubble every night, while they fix it up every morning. Similarly, another episode has the imps start a war between Agrabah and another kingdom so they can supply weapons to each side. It doesn't matter who gets hurt in the process as long as Nefir turns a profit. The imps, especially the sidekick ones, appear to be inspired by the goons from Sleeping Beauty, with their size, bestial appearance, and little mutterings. They're a loyal, hard-working bunch, but their cruel boss doesn't appreciate them at all. Nefir doesn't even join them in their toiling, preferring to supervise from a distance. Although it's never fully explained, there appears to be a general animosity between imps and genies. It's also revealed that the imps have a particular smell that genies cannot stand. Even without the stench, Nefir's personality is repellent enough. Next, there's Aziz, voiced by Michael Bell, one of the series' lesser-known but still impactful villains. The two-parter, Seems Like Old Crimes, offers some interesting backstory for Aladdin. Aziz was part of a traveling circus led by Minos, voiced by Keith David, and Fatima, voiced by Charity Jones. Their performances were all just a distraction, while their trained monkey Abu stole from the audience. During one of their shows, Aladdin gets involved when Abu tries to pick his pocket. Minos sees potential in the street rat and takes him on as a hired thief. Aladdin realizes pretty quickly that this group isn't right for him. Stealing more than he needs is wrong, and the performers just aren't good people. Minos has a temper, Fatima is a brat, and Aziz is sketchy. They all treat Abu terribly. When Aladdin says he wants to bail, Minos decides that now's the best time to go after a real treasure, the mysterious Destiny Stone. Supposedly, this stone has the power to change anyone's destiny. The band of thieves believe it'll bring them from rags to riches. Aladdin goes along with them thanks to some seduction from Fatima. Given her facial resemblance to Jasmine, it seems Aladdin has a type. The stone ends up sucking the thieves inside, with Aladdin and Abu escaping. Aladdin remarks that it did end up changing his destiny, since Abu became his best friend, and he helped Aladdin find the genie's lamp later on. But what of the others? They eventually escape the stone, turned into monsters. Minos is a minotaur, Fatima is a harpy, and Aziz has become a goblin, or perhaps even some kind of djinn with the ability to do actual magic, not just his smoke and mirror tricks from before. The trio set off to rob Agrabah and put themselves in charge, but along the way, Minos and Fatima realize that all they want is each other and to be normal again. After each one sacrifices their life for the other, the Destiny Stone appears to take pity and changes them back to their original forms. Aziz, who always seemed a bit more unhinged, declines the redemption and says nastiness is now his destiny, making his escape. Although Minos and Fatima vow to capture him, they apparently fail because he makes his grand return later on. When he was human, he was an escape artist who wasn't very good at his tricks. He knew some fire breathing, but that was about it. Clearly, he's managed to hone his craft as a magic user because he strikes back with a vengeance. Almost everyone in Agrabah is reduced to sad little blobs, not unlike Ursula's polyps, even the Sultan and Jasmine. Aziz has taken the Destiny Stone seriously and claims it's his destiny to rule over the kingdom. This is what tips Aladdin off about who he's dealing with. The Goblin Man toys with Aladdin and Razoul for a bit, letting them think they're getting the upper hand, but really he has the whole thing planned out. At this point, despite only appearing in 3 episodes, Aziz has established himself as one of Aladdin's most powerful foes. Too powerful, in fact. Like Mozenrath, the more he uses his magic, the more it negatively affects him. Aladdin and Razoul figure this out and goad him into using too much at once, making him essentially overheat, explode, and become a star in the sky. This was near the end of the series, but even if it wasn't, I'm not sure if Aziz could have come back after that blaze of glory. Now, Iago did alright for himself in the show as far as his love life was concerned. Somehow, the parrot was able to be charming enough to find himself an actual goddess for a girlfriend, Thundra the Rainbird, who controls the weather. Our next villain, Malcho, is a rival would-be deity. This enormous winged serpent, voiced by Hector Elizondo, wants to be calling the shots instead, and he perhaps has good reason. Malcho's design is based on the Quetzalcoatl, an Aztec deity who is one of the major gods. The series doesn't really go into any kind of detail on this, but I assume Malcho is not actually the Quetzalcoatl, but maybe a descendant or just a wannabe of the same species. Either way, unlike the responsible Thundra, Malcho comes off as the more destructive, unforgiving type. When Thundra leaves Iago in charge of the weather for vacation, already a bad move, Malcho sees his chance and swoops in, stealing the magic amulet that grants the user powers. Iago might not be quite as quick-witted as Aladdin, but he knows a thing or two about deceit, and manages to trick the serpent and save the day. Malcho is left frozen in a block of ice in the North Pole after his powers get turned against him. Being cold-blooded, this would have been the end for a normal flying, feathered snake dragon thing, but Malcho's a minor god, which means he eventually manages to escape and come back to Agrabah seeking revenge on Iago. This time it's Aladdin who tricks the beast, leaving him in the opposite situation, trapped in lava. Poor Malcho's experienced the worst of both worlds now, and vows vengeance again. Not on that small fry Iago, but rather Aladdin. Yeah, get in line, buddy. The genie never received a true archenemy, but the Mukhtar, voiced by John Kassir, comes close. This reptilian-looking creature is the last of his kind. Mukhtars were known as genie hunters back in the day, sniffing out the magical beings like cats after mice. It's never really explained how or why this started, other than it's simply in their nature. They also don't explain what happened to the other Mukhtar. I like to imagine the genies fought back. It would explain why the animosity has lasted this long. Genies and imps might hate each other as well, but not to this extent. This particular Mukhtar, like our genie, he doesn't have a proper name outside of his species, has decided to profit off his particular talents. Why be a great genie hunter if there's nothing actually in it for you other than a love of the game, so to speak? In both his appearances, the Mukhtar has been hired by someone to trap the big blue genie. The first time, it's one of Genie's former masters, Aged Algebraic, voiced by Jonathan Freeman. The old man initially traded the genie to a sorcerer in return for the gift of immortality. Unfortunately, he still ages, and wants the genie back as his eternal servant. At first, the very presence of the Mukhtar terrifies the genie to his core. He knows exactly how dangerous this guy is, and spends most of the episode trembling in fear. Finally, he finds the courage to challenge his pursuer. Although he ultimately doesn't win the fight, Genie holds his own so well that the Mukhtar is actually impressed. Algebraic decides to let Genie stay with Aladdin, figuring he'll send the Mukhtar after him once Al's passed on. He's not immortal after all. The Mukhtar, having gained respect for the Genie, implies he'll have retired by then, meaning Algebraic will have to find someone else to do his dirty work. Although they parted on decent terms, the Mukhtar is still a threat, as proved when Mozenrath hires him to capture Genie. This time, Genie actually saves Mukhtar's life along the way, and the hunter double-crosses Mozenrath in return. Although he doesn't share Genie's sense of humor, he does appreciate having him as a friend rather than a foe. This time, it's clear that his genie hunting days are over, at least as far as our genie is concerned. Also worth noting is the Mukhtar's pet, a dinosaur-like beast called Saurus, voiced by Frank Welker, who serves as transportation. Another hostile species to appear was the All-Muddy. This race of mudmen consider the humans to be a delicacy. Although they live far underground, they have means of catching their prey. They have a picturesque oasis rigged up in the middle of nowhere. It's so enticing, it might as well be a mirage. It's the real deal, but it serves as a secret entrance to the Muddy's kingdom. The All-Muddy may have a clever trap set up, but for the most part, they're a simple-minded, brutish bunch. Oh, they're dangerous, make no mistake. Like the Batman villain Clayface, they can change shape and size. They're also relentless in their pursuit. But they're not all that bright. All except their king. As the biggest one, he appears to have a brain to match. He's capable of speech, voiced by Jim Cummings, and speaks like posh royalty. Most likely, he's the one who set up the Oasis trap. He may be eloquent, but he's plenty cruel, and finds the pleas of his victims irritating. The king is destroyed in his first appearance, seemingly for good when he dries up in the sun. Other All-Muddies show up in a later one, but more as a generic group of monsters. They strike at night, which means the gang can't use the desert heat against them this time around. Quick-thinking Genie instead flies some snow in, freezing them. It's interesting that, as we've seen with a few other characters, this show wasn't afraid to actually kill off their villains every now and then. We're nearing the end of our section with Zorasto, voiced by Bill Calloway. This mysterious leader of a band of desert marauders is an interesting case. He did appear twice, but he looked completely different both times. In fact, in his first appearance, we wouldn't have even known it was him if he had not announced himself halfway through the episode. In their first appearance, the Marauders are locked in an eternal battle with the heroic Riders of Vermont. Due to a magical crystal being shattered during their altercation, the men are doomed to repeat their fight daily until someone is able to break the time loop. Time shenanigans are also present in their other appearance. Zorasto has somehow obtained a magical hourglass that allows them to briefly stop time and incapacitate their enemies. Whether it's fate or just coincidence, he once again has to face off against the Riders of Vermont when Jasmine calls them in for help. There's not a lot to say about Zorasto, honestly, as he comes off as a fairly generic desert warlord. His first appearance, The Sands of Fate, is still highly recommended, as it's one of the most compelling episodes in the series. Just not for him. On a very minor final note, our last recurring villain is Dominus Tusk, voiced by Jim Cummings, a gigantic minotaur that likes to go around conquering cities. The usual villain hobby. He looks intimidating, but both his appearances have been minor, with him getting defeated each time, while the actual conflict turns out to be something else. Interestingly, Aladdin himself never beat Tusk. Instead, it was the Sultan in the cursed armor, a small child using one of Mechanicles' inventions, and Genie, by accident too. It's most likely that Tusk didn't take on Agrabah again after that. It was just too humiliating. After their many impressive adventures, Aladdin and Jasmine are finally getting married in their third movie, Aladdin and the King of Thieves. Serving as the final chapter in the franchise, the story explores Aladdin's daddy issues before parental trauma became the overdone theme it is today. Al's father, Gazeem, once set out to seek his fortune and to get his family a better life, but was unable to find them when he returned to Agrabah. Assuming the worst, he wound up becoming the titular king, leader of the famous 40 Thieves. Gazeem was never a truly bad person at heart, and so he introduced a moral code against harming innocents. In present day, it seems that most of the thieves find Gazeem so charming and charismatic that they don't mind going along with the new regime. The big exception is the movie's main villain, Saluk, voiced by Jerry Orbach. For someone like Saluk, hurting their victims is just as fun as robbing them, if not more so. He's certainly equipped for the job. The man has seemingly superhuman strength, as evidenced by his effortlessly tossing one of the larger thieves around. He also kills a couple sharks at one point, emerging from the fight without a scratch. This hulking gray-skinned rogue is more than just a sadistic brute. He's a sharp one, and I'm not just talking about his clawed brass knuckles. He knows how to manipulate others, from the royal guards to his fellow thieves. The only person he can't trick is Gazeem himself, who in turn is able to play all the other thieves, including Saluk, like a harp. The two are constantly at odds, with it being no secret that Saluk thinks he should be in charge instead. There may also be a little jealousy at play, even if it's never directly addressed, given how much everyone else loves Gazeem. When Saluk challenges Aladdin to a battle and seemingly dies as a result, none of the other thieves show any sort of sadness. Then again, it seems like their merry band has a pretty high turnover rate, so they might just be desensitized to the whole thing. Surviving his fight, Saluk turns up in Agrabah, wanting revenge on the King of Thieves and his son. He is willing to sell out the rest of his crew in order to achieve this, tipping off the guards about their secret lair and the magic word to open it. After Razoul and his men arrest almost all the thieves, Saluk goes back to the hideout. He tells the remaining members that it was Gazeem that betrayed them, and reminds them of their violent glory days before their leader softened them up. Once the king returns, his old buddies turn on him instantly. What's that thing they say about there being honor among thieves again? Saluk makes for a pretty good villain, and gives the franchise one of its most intense battle scenes about halfway through the movie. However, after seeing baddies like Jafar, Mozenrath, and Mirage, it feels like something is missing with this one. Of course, he's just one part of the story, with the bigger focus being on Aladdin's relationship with his father and their search for the legendary Hand of Midas. And despite what I just said, Saluk does get a gnarly death scene where he falls victim to the Hand's curse, turning to gold while wailing in agony. On the subject of the 40 Thieves, we technically got a glimpse of them during the Genie song in the original Aladdin. In this movie, none of them get any deep characterizations, but a few do stick out. The 7 ones who manage to avoid the guards. A large dumb one, a martial artist, a knife thrower, one who does rope tricks, and my personal favorites, a set of triplet acrobats who almost always wear manic smiles. Unfortunately for the group, their freedom comes at a cost. They get their butts whooped by the heroes twice. Once at the wedding they crash with the rest of their team, and then again near the end during the treasure hunt. To make things worse, the Hand of Midas lands on their boat, turning it to gold and sinking it. The island, which is on the back of a giant turtle by the way, sinks as well, leaving the thieves stranded in the ocean. Unless Genie worked a little merciful magic, I imagine they didn't last too much longer after this. Now on to the returning villains. It's hard to call Iago a true villain at this point, but he's never been truly good either, even though, as I said, he's had some incredibly heroic moments here and there throughout the show. Being around Gazeem, not to mention the prospect of more treasure, brings out Iago's bad side. He encourages his new buddy to steal a magic staff from the treasury that will lead them to the Vanishing Island, which lands them both in the dungeon. Later on, after Aladdin breaks them out and they get captured by Saluk and the thieves, out of the fire and into the frying pan, huh? Iago manages to escape and alerts Aladdin to the danger his dad's in. The final rescue turns out to be a bittersweet one, since it's the last time Iago has an adventure with Aladdin and the others, the people who have essentially become his family. Seemingly realizing that he'll never really fit in among the good guys, Iago ultimately opts to set out with Gazeem at the end. It's funny. Iago has always been a hysterically entertaining character, but he was fairly one-dimensional in the original movie. The sequels and TV show really allowed us to get a good look inside the little bird's psyche, showing someone torn between having friends and crippling greed. Every good thing Iago does is more or less matched with something petty and selfish. With Gazeem, he can still show his good side, while having less pressure to be good all the time. It's really amazing how Iago went on to become what was arguably the franchise's most layered character. As a result, whenever he appears outside of the main series, he can be portrayed as heroic, evil, or neutral, since he's been all three. That's some versatility. Razoul does not have the same depth as Iago, but we've also seen some interesting sides to what was at first an even more one-note character. Although the series gave him some moments where he showed a begrudging respect for Aladdin, the final movie has him once again being bitter about the street rat he used to chase around becoming royalty. While he's still not a true villain, much like in Return of Jafar, he gets manipulated by the story's actual bad guy and winds up in a largely antagonistic role. Although he was already proud of capturing most of the 40 thieves, he's especially pleased to arrest their leader when he finds out he's also Aladdin's father. Later, when Aladdin leads the guards on a chase, just like old times, you can sense the personal animosity between our hero and Razoul when they have a proper confrontation. In the end, though, the captain will just have to accept that Aladdin has become so much more than a common thief. Just like Iago has a surprising amount of development throughout the series, Razoul winds up playing a bigger role than you may have remembered. In fact, the movie's final gag has the guard accidentally catch the wedding bouquet. He seems surprised, yet for once, not totally displeased. The movie graces us with 2 villain songs, again both written by Randy Peterson and Kevin Quinn. Welcome to the 40 Thieves is a lot of fun, with a band of baddies welcoming Aladdin to their ranks, while also not shying away from their dangerous nature. Are You In or Out is led by Saluk as he turns the remaining thieves against Gazeem. It's more sinister, but still a bit on the silly side, especially when the other bandits join in. For a bunch of crusty cutthroats, they're all fabulous singers. Mark Waters returned to write the movie's score, and was joined by Carl Johnson. This time, instead of adapting Mencken's material, they wrote something entirely new, a sweeping soundtrack in the vein of Lawrence of Arabia. The thieves are given a pretty bombastic theme. Iago's theme from Return of Jafar and the TV series surprisingly does not return, replaced by a different comedic piece. While King of Thieves was technically the last chapter in the Aladdin tale, he had an epilogue of sorts in the Hercules TV series, explicitly taking place after his wedding with Jasmine. During all the adventuring, we learn that Jafar wound up in the underworld. Unlike the usual crowd of listless souls, Jafar has a good deal of spirit left in him, and complains enough that he gets the attention of Hades himself. The villains end up bonding over their woes with their respective heroes, and soon argue about who's more difficult to deal with. Hercules, who's thick-headed but has godlike strength, or Aladdin, who's a normal mortal but incredibly clever. For what it's worth, Hades is only mildly interested in all this, as he's more focused on his impending Mount Olympus takeover. Jafar, consumed by a need for revenge, comes up with the idea of having Aladdin and Hercules fight each other, thus eliminating both their rivals. This sparks Hades' interest again, and they put their plan in motion, making Aladdin and Hercules believe the other one kidnapped their best friend. Jafar even gets to use his old man disguise again. The heroes still come out on top, as they always do, leaving Jafar to be dragged into the river Styx. Hades, who was never as invested as the former vizier, decides it's just not worth his time, and allows everyone to escape. He's immortal after all, and has bigger fish to fry. Even before this, he planned to pawn the underworld off on Jafar, assuming he'd be able to dethrone Zeus. Funny enough, I get the feeling Jafar wouldn't have minded being the Lord of the Dead, as long as all the souls groveled the appropriate amount. Like most Disney characters, Jafar and Iago frequented the House of Mouse, and they actually played major roles in a couple episodes. Continuity-wise, the series acts as if the Aladdin sequels never happened, with Iago clearly still being in league with his master. In Donald's lamp trade, Jafar hypnotizes Donald into stealing the lamp for him. The duck does manage to find the genie's lamp, but as it turns out, Jafar really wanted the one in Mickey's office.
Ha! You mean the swoopy one with the little clock gizmo and the fringe along the shade.
Ooh, it has a clock gizmo? Outstanding!
Iago gets to be the headline act in Thanks to Minnie. Alongside a pair of other birds, he performs as the Parrots of the Caribbean, squawking a parody version of the classic Yo-Ho song with new lyrics by Mark Jonathan Davis. In House of Magic, Jafar and Iago are scheduled to do a magic act for the show, but wind up lost in the desert. Daisy tries to substitute, but her spells accidentally make the entire club disappear. At that moment, Jafar and Iago arrive. Mickey asks them to bring the club back and offers the entire city of Agrabah as a reward. Set to a funky version of Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, Jafar restores the club and gets rewarded with a little snow globe with a model Agrabah inside. Perhaps fueled by vengeance, or perhaps because it's simply in his nature, Jafar actually leads all the bad guys in the House of Villains movie to stage a hostile takeover of the club. Typically, when the villains have formed a team, the leader has been someone like Maleficent or Hades, but this time Jafar has a chance to shine. Pity his goals weren't higher. For someone who wanted to rule on high as Sultan, this time his scheme is a lot lower key. On Halloween night, the bad guys take over the House of Mouse, throwing Mickey and friends to the curb and locking the other good guys in the kitchen. And what do they do now that they've triumphed over their enemies at last? Watch the same cartoons as before, but with Jafar as the MC. Mickey strikes back with his trademark sorcerer hat. After a very brief battle, it appears that Jafar has the upper hand again when Aladdin tosses Mick the genie's lamp. As long as Big Blue isn't using it, it makes a nice home for the Wicked Vizier. I guess we shouldn't have expected so much from a House of Mouse movie, but I remember myself and a number of others being pretty disappointed when it came out. There is one bright spot though with the villain showstopper, It's Our House Now, written by Randy Peterson and Kevin Quinn. It's a pretty fun song, performed by some of the best baddies around. Speaking of villain team-ups, Jafar is one of the villains recruited by Gaston in the LEGO Disney Princess Villains Unite, alongside the Evil Queen, Ursula, and surprisingly, Sir Hiss. The group plan on summoning the mysterious bog monster to help them take down a group of Disney princesses, but this turns out to be none other than Chernabog. Jafar and the ladies realize this is one beast that's totally untamable and bail, abandoning Gaston. Villains were never really known for being trustworthy. Jafar isn't the only Aladdin villain to appear in a LEGO Princess special. In the previous one, Castle Quest, one of the side quests has Ariel and Moana trying to find the magic carpet, which is hidden on a pirate ship. The audience is led to believe that the ship belongs to Captain Hook, but surprise surprise, Hook is nowhere in sight, and the captain is none other than a parrot. Iago, voiced by Barrett Letty. This makes the first time Iago was voiced by someone other than Gilbert Gottfried after his death. The same year, in Once Upon a Studio, Iago was voiced by Piotr Michael. In the live-action world, Jafar appeared in both Once Upon a Time and its spin-off, Once Upon a Time in Wonderland. In the Wonderland series, he's played by Naveen Andrews, with his child self played by Anthony Keevan. In the main series, Jafar is played by Oded Fair. In his backstory, we learn that Jafar once allied himself with a sorceress named Amara, played by Zuleika Robinson. Eventually, Jafar betrays Amara, transforming her into a snake staff. In Descendants, Jafar is one of the many villains banished to the Isle of the Lost. Played by Maz Jobrani, he now runs a shop and hopes against hope he can come across a magic lamp. His son, Jay, played by Boo Boo Stewart, is one of the main villain kids that winds up on a path to redemption. Stepping away from the moving image, it's time to take a look at Jafar's appearances in print. A few years before I began this retrospective, I did a different video about the many times Jafar returned, which was sort of a precursor to this series. One book I discussed was Wishful Thinking by Lisa Ann Marsoli. The story has the gang find Jafar's lamp and turn the tables on him. Genie uses his 3 wishes to try and teach Jafar to be a better person, going so far to make his last wish that someday Jafar will be a good guy himself when he least expects it. Perhaps in this story's continuity, but in others, not so much. A Whole New World by Liz Broswell is another entry in the Twisted Tales series, where a monkey wrench gets thrown into the classic story's plots. This twist has Jafar actually getting the lamp from Aladdin at the Cave of Wonders, with Abu not being able to snatch it in time. While Al, Abu, and the carpet are still able to escape thanks to relentless digging, they come back to a much darker Agrabah. Jafar has taken over, but he's doing things differently this time. Instead of ruling on high, he parades through the streets, buying the citizens' love with food and money. Very quickly, though, he changes tactics, depriving people of their basic needs unless they swear loyalty. Jafar knows no one will ever really love him, certainly not when he's acting like this, and even the genie's magic can't accomplish such a feat. Instead, Jafar tries draining Genie and Carpet's essence, in hopes that he can be an even more powerful sorcerer than he already is. One of his most disturbing magical deeds is bringing the dead back to life as zombie warriors, including Razoul, who dies in an accident about midway through the story. It's not hard to see why Genie really doesn't like doing this kind of thing. We learn a little more about Jafar's backstory at one point, where he mentions he was sold as a slave in his childhood, presumably by his uncaring parents. Meanwhile, Iago is a no-show, as he was killed by Jafar in order to obtain some especially dark blood magic, the kind that requires sacrificing something you truly love. As a reminder, or perhaps even a tribute, Jafar's emblems all feature a very nasty-looking parrot. A scene where Jafar, in the thralls of his madness, hallucinates he's speaking to his dearly departed bird would be reused by the author for her Peter Pan story a few years later, this time with Captain Hook and Smee. Another book series, Dark Ascension, gives Jafar a different backstory in The Wishless Ones by Hafsah Faizal. This one introduces his younger brother, Rohan. Jafar and Rohan lose their mother at a young age and grow up with their abusive father, who especially hates his older son. Rohan tries to be the peacemaker between the two, but it's difficult. Jafar is brilliant and has good ideas to help his father's business, but he also has an overconfident, patronizing way of addressing people that really drives his baba up the wall. Often, Jafar finds himself beaten, bruised, and locked in a closet as punishment. After a fire destroys their home and takes their father's life, Jafar, Rohan, and their pet parrot set out toward the kingdom of Magriz, where Jafar has earned a scholarship. The brothers each want to learn something from the kingdom's legendary House of Wisdom. Rohan wants to find a magic lamp so he can wish his parents back to life. Jafar wants to find a pair of rubies that have hypnotic powers. Together, the brothers make an excellent team. Jafar is the brains and Rohan is the heart, but their journey threatens to drive a wedge between them. Meanwhile, Iago is the same loudmouth from the movie. He was bought in the marketplace and has no idea about his past, other than he was most likely once human. As Jafar and Rohan grow distant, Jafar finds himself getting much closer to Iago. Over in the comics, there was an alternate Aladdin sequel penned before Return of Jafar came out, More Arabian Nights. This two-parter also follows Jafar and Iago's attempts to get revenge on Aladdin. The first story has Jafar going through several prospective masters, all of which end poorly for the new genie. After a string of disappointments, he demands Iago find him someone worthy. Iago doesn't need to look much further than Isabella, a magician who looks exactly like Jafar, only dressed in emerald colors. Figuring this was a sign, the parrot gives Isabella the lamp. As it turns out, the magician performed for the Sultan recently, and Jafar has him go back to the palace to do another show. This way, he and Iago can sneak in and take care of the whole royal family. Genie fights back when the villains reveal themselves, and unlike Return of Jafar, our big blue buddy is most certainly not second-rate this time around. In fact, he defeats the baddies pretty easily, and has Isabella, who was never really evil in the first place, wish them back into their lamp, and trapped in the Cave of Wonders. I do have to mention that the image of Iago in a kick line of birds was repeated in The Return of Jafar. I'm not sure if someone working on the movie read the comic, or if it's just a strange coincidence. Agrabah is one of the many stops in the Kilala Princess manga. While searching for some magic gems, the series MacGuffins, our heroine Ray and her friends meet Jasmine and Aladdin, who's currently donned his Prince Ali disguise. The story takes place mostly around the Whole New World section of the movie, so Jafar is somewhat preoccupied with his master plan to pay much attention to the newcomers. He does cause a bit of conflict for Ray when Jasmine and the Sultan give her a gem as a gift. Although gems are what they're looking for, Ray has a feeling that this isn't one of the important ones. It doesn't stop Jafar from jealously stewing over this stranger getting a gift from the royal vault, something he feels he's entitled to. Later, when Jasmine gives Ray a flower, a more meaningful present, Jafar has Iago pettily snatch it and toss it out in the desert somewhere. The flower is more important than anyone realizes, since it's a token from Jasmine's heart, and winds up transforming into the very gem Ray was looking for. She leaves Agrabah to continue on her adventures, knowing that the rest of the Aladdin plot will unfold normally, with Jafar being defeated, and the rest of the characters getting a happy ending. There are also a number of short foreign comics featuring Jafar and Iago as villains. However, at the moment I'm unable to access most of them. They generally seem comedy-based, in a similar vein to some of the comics I talked about in the Ursula entry. Before we get to the video games, I've had a number of viewers asking me to mention the Lorcana card game. I confess I'm not terribly familiar with this Magic the Gathering-inspired series, and for that matter, I'm not familiar with Magic the Gathering period. It's definitely worth bringing up that one of the recent decks, Reign of Jafar, is very relevant to this video. The storyline has Jafar come into possession of the Hexwell Crown, a powerful artifact that helps him take over the island where the game is set. Now, moving on from physical card games, we'll take a look at some of Jafar's video game appearances. The first video game we'll be covering was released for the Super Nintendo. In the early levels, the Palace Guards serve as the most frequently seen enemies. Large ones modeled after breath-throw barrels, while a seemingly infinite number of Hakim lookalikes shoot a seemingly infinite number of arrows. Farouk the apple vendor serves as the first boss. As I said, I never thought of him as a villain per se, but he's a logical choice for a boss fight. In a platformer, you can't just charm your way out of a tough situation. Abu hilariously watches the battle from afar, offering some monkey moral support. Later, there's a strange interlude added for the video game, where Abu gets lost in a pyramid right after the heroes escape the Cave of Wonders. The area seems to have a sort of connection with Jafar, as it has a distinct Cobra aesthetic, along with several archer guards. Once Jafar takes over the palace, Aladdin again faces the royal guards, with a sword thrower added to their ranks. Iago continuously pops up as well, dropping bouncing skulls in Aladdin's path. Jafar, of course, serves as the final boss. His first phase has Sorcerer Jafar flying around, summoning lightning bolts and weird potted bird enemies. After that, he turns into a cobra for the second phase. The floor becomes the snake's coils, which rise in and out of the fire surrounding them. This is one heavily scaled snake. Even when Aladdin technically defeats him, he snaps back with a final surprise blow that the players aren't able to dodge. This leads to a cutscene, where Aladdin, at the end of his rope, tricks Jafar into wishing himself into a genie. Maybe I was wrong. This is one platformer where you can charm your way out of a tough situation. Provided it's at the very end, of course. Sega players had the choice of 2 Aladdin games. The more fondly remembered of the 2 for the Genesis had stunning graphics and armed Al with the sword. The opening levels again find the street rat battling guards in the marketplace. Around the same time, Aladdin also faces off against Gazeem for part of the Golden Scarab. This is especially interesting since the characters never actually met in the movie. Near the end of the market section, Aladdin fights Razoul as a boss, tossing barrels. At this point, my script just repeats, "Don't make a Donkey Kong joke again and again." Moving on, the game's most interesting boss is based on the ape statue with the tempting ruby in the Cave of Wonders. Now it's a living, multi-armed Shiva-inspired statue that can teleport and wields a sword in its feet. That's pretty unique. The Sultan's palace is crawling with guards, both before and after Jafar takes over. Iago flies around at several points, being a general pest, and later serves as a level boss. The parrot uses Jafar's store machine to summon ghosts, but he's no match for our hero. Like the Super Nintendo game, Jafar is fought in 2 phases. The human version, who tries to pull you toward him with a staff, and the snake version, who can breathe fire this time around. One of the less talked about Aladdin games was also released by Sega for the Master System. This smaller scale affair sticks the closest to the movie's plot, to the point where nearly half the game is dialogue-heavy cutscenes retelling the story. The programmers seem to really like auto-scrolling chase levels. The opening has Aladdin on the run from Razoul. Later, Aladdin does the chasing himself, trying to capture Jafar after he's been exposed. Once again, Jafar's boss fight has Aladdin fight him in both human and snake form. In the world of edutainment games, Jafar made another return in Reading Quest. Aladdin hears word that the genie has somehow become trapped in the Cave of Wonders, so he ventures back inside with 3 bumbling assistants. The Babylon brothers, voiced by Corey Burton, Frank Welker, and Nick Jameson. The cave really just lets anybody in nowadays. It turns out this was all a ruse, and Aladdin accidentally frees Jafar, who quickly zaps the street rats straight to the dungeon. In no time at all, Jafar has usurped the Sultan and hypnotized the Babylon brothers into helping him. The only way to imprison Jafar again is by reading an inscription, which Jafar scrambles and scatters throughout Agrabah. Jasmine, Genie, Abu, and Iago work with a player to get everything put back together in order to set things right. Jafar orders the brothers to thwart the heroes, but the illiterate men prove to be quite possibly the worst sidekicks the Vizier's ever had. Even Abis Mal could probably outthink them. Once Jafar is recaptured, his hypnotic hold on the men dissipates. More notable is the other edutainment game, Math Quest, because it's one of the few times Robin Williams returned to voice the genie. The villainess here is a different genie, Bizarra, voiced by April Winchell. She loved to deliberately twist her master's wishes, so her lamp was sealed away inside a floating pyramid. At the beginning of the game, a snake accidentally rubs her lamp, letting her out. Since animals can't be masters, Bizarra is technically free to do whatever she wants. I'll bet Jafar's ghost is kicking himself right now. If he had just been a little nicer to Iago, he could have been a free genie himself. Regardless, Bizarra seems to know that Aladdin and his crew are exactly the kind of hero types who would recapture her, so she strikes first. The gang is split up and hidden across Agrabah. Players journey with Genie and Iago, who have been imprisoned in the palace dungeons, to free the others and return Bizarra to her lamp. This isn't easy, since Bizarra has broken it into 3 pieces and scattered them. Apparently, broken and destroyed are different things, based on what happened in Return of Jafar. In the final confrontation, Aladdin has Genie send him into the lamp, and goads Bizarra into following him. According to Genie rules, when rubbing is concerned, it's first in, first out. One rub, click, of the lamp, and Aladdin is back outside, with Bizarra trapped once more. NASIRA'S Revenge introduces Jafar's crazy sister, voiced by Jodie Benson. NASIRA seems to be an even more powerful sorceress than her brother, managing to brainwash the guards into kidnapping Jasmine and the Sultan, allowing her to take the throne. Aladdin sets off on a rescue mission, fighting a number of NASIRA'S associates along the way. The palace presents the street rat with a battle against a possessed Razoul, who actually thanks Al once he breaks the trance. We learn that Jasmine is trapped in a pyramid, held prisoner by Anubis himself. This franchise really loved to dip into Egyptian mythology. The Sultan, meanwhile, is captive in the far-off ancient city, guarded by a mysterious baddie known only as the Evil Sultan. NASIRA isn't just trying to take over Agrabah. In all his running around, Aladdin collects a number of artifacts which NASIRA snatches from him. With these, she can cast a powerful spell to bring Jafar back from the dead. The big showdown has Aladdin facing off against the evil siblings. Jafar, who's in mid-resurrection, appears as a giant head, weirdly resembling the MCP from Tron. In the end, Aladdin triumphs over NASIRA and sends Jafar back to the underworld where he belongs. One of the more interesting finds for this video was alerted to me by one of my viewers, Donald Deal. Thank you. The Fate of Agrabah was a cancelled video game that would have had 3D environments with traditionally animated characters. From the existing footage, we learn that Jafar has taken over again, and Razoul has gone back to serving his old boss. What's especially interesting is that this game was going to feature characters from the TV series, the Al-Muddi and Ayam Aghoul. It's unclear if they're also working for Jafar or operating independently. Very curious. Disney Princess for the Game Boy Advance gives Jasmine her own section where she gets to be the heroine. Aladdin is only mentioned at the end. In her story, Jafar is up to his old tricks, trying to hypnotize the Sultan and take over Agrabah. He's imprisoned Jasmine and Abu in the Cave of Wonders to keep them out of the way. After finding the lamp, Jasmine journeys toward the palace, sword in hand. Despite her weapon, anyone she hits, mostly guards, just get mildly stunned. I'm choosing to believe she's deliberately going easy on them. Can't slaughter your own men after all, even if they're currently working for the bad guy. This all leads to a battle against Jafar, of course, who proves to be no match for the princess. The Magic Kingdom's mobile game has a more comedic take on Jafar, portraying him as scheming and then failing to get revenge on Aladdin time and time again. It gets to the point where Al actually starts to feel sorry for the villain. Iago, meanwhile, seems to be more of a neutral party. He's wary of both the good guys and Jafar, and really leans into the whole "I'm looking out for me" attitude he had at the beginning of the sequel. In Epic Mickey, The Power of Illusion, the forgotten witch Mizrabel abducts a number of well-known Disney characters to absorb their paint. Jafar is one of her victims, but doesn't realize it. The witch has manipulated him into thinking she's made him a great sorcerer. Mickey Mouse takes on Jafar in a recreation of his throne room. Jasmine once again sits captive in an hourglass. For more déjà vu, Jafar again morphs into a giant snake, but gets defeated. This convinces him that Mizrabel has been lying, and he reluctantly allies himself with Mickey. Although he's on the mouse's side, Jafar is not really reformed, and cheekily hints that he's still plotting something nasty once he's free of Mizrabel's clutches. Because he's such a nice guy, Mickey still helps him out, finding Iago elsewhere in the giant castle and reuniting the old friends. Dreamlight Valley takes a similar approach to Jafar. He's an outright villain at first, trying to steal the spark of imagination, which spells major trouble for the entire island. The player is able to defeat Jafar by tricking him into wishing himself into a genie. Given that characters in this game are missing certain memories, we can assume that Jafar just forgot what happened to him last time. Although he makes amends and becomes a citizen of the island, Jafar still retains his villainous streak. He might be playing nice for the most part, but he's not above trying a few wicked tricks here and there. Cursed Cafe features the classic Disney villains winding up in modern times and learning about our exciting new vices. Jafar, in another bid for world domination, is made to recall the golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. His plot is to forego the gold entirely and create his own cryptocurrency, Wishcoin. This way, he dupes people into spending real money on fake money. Before this gets too bogged down in real-world issues, I'll jump over to a fan favorite, Kingdom Hearts. Jafar works alongside the other Disney villains on Maleficent's council in the original game. The Dark Fairy warns him not to get too cocky when it comes to using the Heartless, but Jafar ignores her. The Agrabah plot is similar to the Aladdin movie. Jafar has kidnapped Jasmine in accordance to Maleficent's plan of capturing the 7 Princesses of Heart. In addition, he's using the Heartless to try to take control of the kingdom. Aladdin, meanwhile, is trying to save Jasmine with the help of the genie. Al uses his first 2 wishes to fight against the villain. First, to rid the area of Heartless, and second, to try to get Jasmine away from Jafar. Iago snatches the lamp, allowing Jafar to make a couple wishes of his own. Wish number 1 is finding Agrabah's magical keyhole, and number 2 is having the genie join him in battle against Aladdin, Sora, Donald, and Goofy. This time, Genie's willing to skirt the line a bit, deliberately putting up a terrible fight against the heroes. Finally, Jafar wishes himself to be an all-powerful genie. Although his lamp still comes along with the wish, he doesn't automatically get pulled inside. Instead, Sora has to fight him first. He can either attack Jafar directly, or attack Iago, who's carrying the lamp. Defeating the villains results in both of them getting trapped in the itty-bitty living space. Maleficent shows no pity, saying that Jafar's hatred is what really overcame him. Kingdom Hearts 2 has Maleficent send Pete after Jafar's lamp. Not to get him back as a proper ally, but instead to turn him into one of her Heartless. As it turns out, the lamp has already been found by the little peddler, the movie's narrator. Since this plotline follows the Return of Jafar, the peddler is more or less put in the Abis Mal role. I'm assuming since the peddler already appeared in the first game, they just wanted to reuse his model. Iago, meanwhile, has gotten out of the lamp and wants to make amends with Aladdin. Like in the sequel, he accidentally helps out Sora, which earns him some shaky trust from the heroes. Again, Jafar then intimidates Iago into double-crossing Al. The parrot claims he knows where the escaped villain is hiding, and leads the good guys on a wild goose chase to some ruins. A fake version of Jafar, known as Jafar's Shadow, is fought here, but the real purpose is to get everyone away from the palace so Jafar can get Jasmine. When everyone arrives back to save the day, Iago redeems himself by essentially taking a magical bullet for Aladdin. Jafar turns back into a genie and has a lengthy battle with Sora above the city. Upon defeat, his lamp vanishes, signifying Jafar's gone for good this time. Iago survives, of course, and is actually accepted as a friend to the others. We also get a little insight into the parrot's self-worth, when he worries that he isn't a friend worth having since he can't actually help Aladdin all that much. Kingdom Hearts Key has the most straightforward adaptation of the plot, following the movie closely. Interestingly, the player character takes on the role of Gazeem here at one point, being sent into the Cave of Wonders by Jafar and having it collapse on them. Of course, they emerge from the sand unharmed a few moments later. Of special note, this is the only Kingdom Hearts where the Royal Guards appear. There's also a boss fight against Jafar as the Cobra. Similarly, the very obscure mobile game Kingdom Hearts V-Cast featured an Agrabah section where Jafar was also fought in Cobra form. To wrap up the video game section, we'll return once more to Twisted Wonderland. This time we're taking a look at the Scarabia House, made in honor of the Sorcerer of the Sands. This well-respected figure was renowned for his expert advice to the king, not to mention how his hard work allowed him to obtain a magic lamp. When we meet the House Warden, Kaleem Al-Azim, voiced by Kazuki Furuta, it would appear that something strange is going on. At first, he's exceedingly friendly, hospitable, and generous. All of Scarabia seems to love him. However, he's become prone to mysterious mood swings, turning him into a tyrant who mercilessly exhausts the other students. And then, suddenly, he goes back to normal. Needless to say, it's caused some unrest, and the students are beginning to think that the dorm's Vice House Warden, Jamil Viper, would be a better choice as leader. Jamil, voiced by Kaname Fatuba, has essentially acted as Kaleem's number 2/advisor for most of his life. Kaleem's family is royalty, and Jamil was more or less assigned to be Kaleem's best friend. Because of their different social classes, Jamil's parents always warned him to never outshine Kaleem, meaning Jamil could never reach his full potential. Kaleem, being so good-natured, and rather naive, never picked up on this. You can probably figure out what's been going on. Jamil, as the game's Jafar stand-in, has been hypnotizing Kaleem to act terribly in order to start a student uprising to put himself at the top for once. After he's exposed and defeated, he finally lets it all out. Kaleem actually forgives him and promises his friend that from now on, they are to be equals. Jamil still seems to resent Kaleem a little, but Kaleem either doesn't notice or just ignores it. It's an odd friendship, but it's a friendship nonetheless. As the game progresses, his animosity toward Kaleem also dies down, and their bond becomes a lot more genuine. Later on, we also meet Jamil's sister, Najma, one of the few female characters in the entire game. She doesn't have the same hang-ups as her brother, and enjoys teasing him a bit. For our final section of the video, where we check out the villain's presence in theme parks, the most notable appearance was arguably not by Jafar, but rather Iago in one of the all-time infamous attraction rethemes. In the late 90s, it was worried that Tropical Serenade, aka the Tiki Room, at Walt Disney World was getting stale, and was viewed by guests as boring or too long. In order to shorten the show, give it a hip makeover and add some recognizable IP, 1998 introduced the Enchanted Tiki Room under new management. The managers in question are Iago and Zazu from The Lion King. It appears that the new owners don't care for each other all that much, with Iago outright saying that Zazu is most certainly not his friend. While the refined Hornbill warns his obnoxious partner to play nice with the Tiki Room, Iago goes on about how much the show needs updating. He bursts into his own version of Friend Like Me with new lyrics by Imagineer Kevin Rafferty. Shortly after, the Tiki gods have had enough. Aoa, goddess of destruction,
emerges from the fountain and gives the parrot a well-deserved zap, sending him out of the theater. Zazu is able to get things back under control, with the Tiki Gods performing In the Still of the Night and a hip-hop version of the Tiki Room song. Iago, singed and covered in bandages, returns and declares the new show to be a success. He even refers to Zazu as his friend. As I said, this version of the Tiki Room has gone down in history as being one of Disney's worst. The new animatronics were very nice, but the general attitude of decrying a classic attraction as being boring and out of date did not sit well with fans. Unfortunately for our video subject, a lot of this falls on Iago, with Zazu doing his best to keep the peace. Well, it could be argued that Iago is meant to be the antagonist who learns his lesson that the Tiki Room was fine the way it was. That doesn't really get conveyed with the rest of the show. The Tiki Gods still rap after all. The 90s attitude is very present. In what was either a freak accident or an actual divine attack on the show, a small fire broke out in 2011, badly damaging one of the Iago animatronics. How appropriate. Instead of rebuilding him, Disney opted to restore the Tiki Room to its original format, albeit an abbreviated version. Contrasting this, we have the most beloved Aladdin theme park tie-in with the musical spectacular that ran from 2003 to 2016 in California Adventure. The movie was condensed into a 45-minute performance, still managing to capture the story's extravagance, comedy, and heart. Unlike the Broadway version, this one stayed closer to the movie's script, given the shortened runtime. Jafar, for instance, still turns into a giant snake at the end. Iago is still a parrot, performed via puppetry. One of the big differences I noticed was that he doesn't put on a bird-brained facade. He openly shows off his sapience to Aladdin and Jasmine at separate instances earlier in the story. There's also an idea in this show that got reused in the Broadway script. In both, Iago tries to sneak off after Jafar's defeat, only to be caught. The Broadway Iago is taken to the dungeon, while the theme park Iago is blasted off by a genie in a cloud of feathers. Both this and the Broadway version also have Jafar disguise himself as Aladdin's relative to save him from the guards. After the show's long run at the park, it continues to be mounted on the Disney Cruise Lines. A different cruise show, Villains Tonight, even reused the Iago puppet in one scene. The plot concerns Hades finding out he's fallen behind on wickedness. If he doesn't gather enough evil energy soon, he'll be out of a job. One of his attempts to bring in the bad vibes is by staging a trashy talk show. Nothing good ever comes out of those. Iago is the guest, griping about working for Jafar. After the parrot lets out the expected number of insults, surprise guest Jafar enters the scene. Instead of the two of them fighting like Hades wants, they sing a heartfelt duet of Wind Beneath My Wings. It's more silly than touching, but it's about as far from what Hades is trying to accomplish as you can get. Let's stick with this live entertainment theme. Disneyland's Aladdin's Oasis show that ran from 1993 to 1997 answered the question no one dared ask. What would happen if you set the story of Aladdin inside a nightclub? The retelling shows Aladdin on the run from Razoul while looking out for Jasmine. Jafar sent his guards after the boy because he's found the magic lamp. The vizier himself storms in later on, accompanied by Iago, played by a puppet. At one point, in an eerily prophetic moment, one of the performers calls the parrot a tiki bird reject. This insult would later be used in the musical Spectacular show. Aladdin gives the bad guys the slip a few times, but Jafar's pretty clever himself. Under the guise of a magic trick, he makes Jasmine disappear in order to lure Aladdin out in the open. Al, using one of his wishes, summons the genie and turns Jafar into a gong. Genies can't kill, but maybe this counts as a loophole. Jasmine is restored, and we have the usual happy ending, with Iago getting the last word. Yet another elaborate retelling of Aladdin was staged at Tokyo Disneyland from 1993 to 1994. Aladdin's Great Adventure, performed right in front of the castle, starts the story with Al on the run from the guards. Jasmine shows up in disguise and gets accosted for taking an apple, but this time it's Jafar himself who enters the scene to take her back to the palace. Aladdin ziplines down and fights the guards, but winds up losing. Jafar mocks him in the same manner that Prince Ahmed does in the movie, and leaves the street rat in the dust. The Cave of Wonders rises from the ground, leading into the scene of Aladdin rubbing the lamp and the genie's big showstopper. Unfortunately, our heroes are so caught up in singing and dancing that they don't realize Jafar's taken the lamp until it's too late. A common musical theater mistake. Taking Jasmine hostage, Jafar wishes himself to be a sorcerer. Wasting no time, he transforms into a snake. The usual story beats of Aladdin tricking him play out afterward, but I have to make special note of what a cool-looking figure they used for Genie Jafar. A second Japanese Aladdin show premiered in 2005. Aladdin's Whole New World was staged in Tokyo Disney Sea's Mediterranean harbor. I can't quite make heads or tails of this one given the lack of a good translation, but it looks like fun.
As far as I can surmise, Aladdin and the other heroes, including a rare theme park appearance by the Sultan, are enjoying some sort of stunt show. Suddenly, Jafar sails over, intent on either ruining their fun or showing them up. Genie accepts the challenge, and the show becomes a competition. When he appears to be losing, Jafar falls back on the ever-reliable turn-into-a-snake routine, here portrayed by a kite. His defeat is signified by the kite eventually nosediving into the water. During the good guy's victory celebration, Jafar sails by again, this time waving a white flag and looking utterly ashamed. For another water-based extravaganza, let's turn to Fantasmic. While the Disneyland version has a giant Kaa from the Jungle Book just kind of minding his own business, the Disney World show has a different servant, this one a lot more hostile. During the villain's attack, Jafar sends Mickey into the Cave of Wonders where the little mouse tries to escape via magic carpet. The collapsing cave is only one of his problems, though, as Jafar appears in snake form next with glowing eyes. Mickey sees a magic lamp and rubs it, hoping to either summon the good genie or trap Jafar. A good guess, but neither of these things happen. Instead, Jafar calls on Hades, who continues the villain's onslaught. This being Mickey's dream, the mouse still prevails in the end. While Jafar and the others gang up on Mickey and Fantasmic, Iago briefly antagonizes one of Mickey's friends, Donald, in Mickey's PhilharMagic. It's oddly appropriate, as Donald is one of the only Disney birds to take even more pain than Iago over the years. In the Unfairly Ever After show, a number of villains plead their case to the Magic Mirror about how misunderstood they are. Jafar is forced to share the spotlight with Hades, as the two of them argue over who has it worse. This comes near the end of the performance, with more and more bad guys chiming in, driving the poor mirror up the wall. The Vizier and the God of the Dead are paired up yet again in the Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom interactive game. Hades, in the lead villain role, is working on taking over the park, recruiting other nefarious partners along the way. For some of these helpers, Hades uses a false identity. He calls himself Prince Azure when he summons Jafar from his magic lamp. He then uses his 3 wishes to help him conquer the kingdom. For one of the wishes, locating the Crystal MacGuffin, Jafar needs Iago to raid the palace for the Sultan's blue diamond. Seems that even genies need help sometimes. This is really just an excuse to work in a battle against the parrot, who proves to be about as effective as you'd imagine. Another battle is against the Cobra, but with a minor twist. Instead of Jafar transforming himself, as he's done many times in the past, he changes his staff into the giant snake this time around. That's some Old Testament material. Like some of the other characters Hades hires, Jafar plans on stabbing him in the back the moment he has a chance so he can fly off and do his own thing. This never happens, with the players defeating him and trapping him back in the lamp where he belongs. Elsewhere, Le Passage Enchanté d'Aladdin, in English, Aladdin's Enchanted Passage, is a walkthrough in Disneyland Paris showing elaborate dioramas telling the movie's story. Jafar, Iago, and the guards are all on display here, very much in the vein of the Emporium windows or the Sleeping Beauty walkthrough in California. Finally, Jafar has been a meetable character since the movie's debut, often coming out around Halloween like his fellow villains. Sometimes he has a prop Iago on his shoulder. Although Disney managed to make Abu into a walk-around character, how well they achieved that is up to you, they have yet to have a proper walk-around Iago. Time can only tell. It feels like I've been working on this video for 1001 nights. Heck, it might seem like you've been watching it for that long as well. Thank you for sticking with this, and I hope you've enjoyed this look at Aladdin's many villains. I'd also like to give a quick shout out to one of my viewers, Tim Lyons, who I'm told is a big fan. Thank you for your support, and I'm really glad you enjoy the series so much. I try to keep the series chronological, but at the time of making this, we've reached the holiday season. With that in mind, I'm jumping forward just a tiny bit, so next time we can look at Oogie Boogie in The Nightmare Before Christmas. But for now, come back soon, that's the end, till another Arabian Night.
Hey, where's everyone going? Hey, who said you can leave?
I did.
You can't leave until Jafar says so. He's the boss. Jafar! Now where'd he go? Jafar! Oh, this is great.
Say goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. See you soon.